An off-screen voice calls out to Licia, a blonde woman wearing a white wedding gown.
Duke Claude Lindbergh is a 27-year-old nobleman with vibrant red hair and a stoic gaze.
Looking through her sheer wedding veil, the blonde woman stares forward with a curious expression.
Licia is visibly startled when she receives a formal welcome upon her arrival at the venue. 2 rows of maids bow their heads in a synchronized gesture of respect for the bride.
Licia feels overwhelmed by the elaborate greeting, having never experienced such high levels of formal treatment.
Claude leads Licia by the hand as they walk together toward a bright, sun-drenched doorway. A narrative box confirms that this specific day marks a very special occasion for them.
The text explains that the couple is having an intentionally small and understated wedding ceremony.
A close-up shot focuses on Licia's blue eye as she observes the quiet wedding environment.
2 officials discuss the plain nature of the wedding, noting there will be no grand reception.
Claude signals it is time to depart, and Licia softly agrees as they walk together. While walking, Licia observes that her new husband is just as tall as she had imagined. She considers their statures, noting her high heels help balance their heights while they stand together.
Narrative boxes describe Claude as not only exceptionally handsome, but also as a man of great wealth.
Extreme close-up panels emphasize Claude's striking features, specifically his crimson-colored hair and matching red eyes. While the public sees a cold-hearted man, noblewomen find his aloof personality incredibly charming and attractive. Claude stands tall in his red military-style uniform, surrounded by a bright and shimmering atmosphere. For several years, the Duke has remained the most popular topic of interest among high society women. The text describes Claude as a man deeply devoted to his work, often surrounded by paperwork. Despite his long hours at a desk, he is known for maintaining an impressive physical condition. Looking at his back, Licia concludes that he appears to be very well trained and disciplined.
Licia becomes extremely flustered thinking about Claude's physique until she feels a wave of embarrassment. Rumors circulate that the Duke possesses combat skills superior to those of professional soldiers in the army. Observing him with a sword, Licia understands why women are so enamored with his martial prowess. Pressured by his relatives to marry, Claude sought a convenient partner to fulfill his social obligations.
A group of nobles whispers in the shadows, questioning the Duke's choice of a bride.
Licia identifies herself as the woman society mock, citing her dark circles and poor physical condition.
She reflects on being ridiculed for wearing expensive dresses that others felt did not suit her.
Dark shapes with laughing eyes symbolize the mockery Licia endured from her peers in high society. Looking dejected, Licia stands alone in a floral gown, surrounded by symbolic dark thorns and shadows.
The narrative shifts to explain the simple reason behind why Claude chose Licia as his wife. He chose her because her family history is more ancient than the current imperial royal family.
Licia accepted his proposal to escape her family, as she felt unloved and unwanted by them.
She recalls being ignored and isolated by other noblewomen who walked past her without a word. Occupying the lowest position in her household, Licia felt her family was slowly draining her spirit.
Her family's prestige comes from governing the same land for thousands of years, predating the monarchy.
Despite their ancient name, the family was so poor they could not provide a wedding dowry. People believed a certain red-haired princess was the only woman suitable for the perfect duke. Political rumors suggested the princess would eventually marry a foreign prince to strengthen a national alliance.
A knight stands over a chest of gold, representing the massive wealth and power of royalty.
The princess pursued Claude with confidence, clinging to his arm as if he were already hers. Claude remains a symbol of power, his portrait framed by decorative vines and a royal red ribbon.
Narrative text highlights that Claude's wealth is so vast he never has to justify his spending. Due to his immense power and money, every lady in the kingdom dreamed of becoming his bride.
The Duke had spent his entire life successfully rejecting every romantic advance from noble women. Having avoided women for so long, it was obvious Claude had no desire to marry the princess. His high status usually allowed him to easily ignore the social pressure to marry most ladies.
The red-haired princess was the spoiled youngest child and the only girl of the imperial family.
Claude rushed into a marriage with Licia specifically to avoid being forced to marry the princess. Licia reflects on her decision to marry Claude, wondering if the princess's hatred outweighs staying in her former home.
Licia understands that the Duke cannot afford for their marriage to fail, giving her some sense of security.
Claude looks at her with a questioning expression as Licia thinks they are now in this situation together. Staring forward with a surprised look, Licia receives a silent, sudden shock upon reflecting on her new life.
Claude dismisses his thought and tells Licia to rest while he personally shows her to her private room.
He explains she will meet the servants tomorrow while Licia politely thanks him and celebrates her upcoming nap. Claude leads Licia by the hand as they walk together down a grand, sunlit hallway toward her quarters. Reaching the room, Claude tells Licia to notify the servants if any specific needs or issues arise later.
Licia acknowledges his instructions while secretly wondering if his busy schedule means he will be absent quite often. Reflecting on the hostile maids, Licia decides she must address their attitude immediately if it is truly intentional. Licia asks the Duke to fulfill his end of their bargain, and he tells her she can rest assured.
Claude promises her a comfortable life with 3 daily meals and nap time, proposing they discuss details tomorrow.
Licia accepts his offer and expresses her hope that they can maintain a successful partnership from now on.
She recalls that her sole condition for marriage was a simple life consisting of only the bare necessities.
After entering her new room, Licia sits on the bed and looks out at the bright, open scenery. She remembers his promise that she is not required to attend parties or fulfill traditional duties as his wife.
Overjoyed by her lack of responsibility, Licia flops onto the bed, feeling incredibly relieved to finally be free.
Narrative text explains that while she must bear an heir, she is satisfied with the freedom Claude provides. Licia imagines herself raising the Duke's children from other ladies, an arrangement she finds perfectly acceptable and pleasant. Narrative text confirms that while Licia lacks affection for the Duke, she has a deep love for children. A close-up shows Licia holding a baby, highlighting her genuine desire to care for and protect young children. She recalls Claude's confused sigh after she shared her thoughts on children, finding his reaction to be quite strange. Lying down, Licia admits she doesn't deserve a man like Claude, understanding why the staff might feel hostile.
Looking through the window, Licia realizes that the most important thing is that she is finally completely free.
A gentle smile appears on Licia's face as she enjoys her first moment of true peace and independence.
A close-up shot focuses on the intricate gold leaf patterns and fine lace of the bride's white gown.
Licia Vertigo stands in a field of sunflowers, identifying herself as the descendant of a very old family.
She explains that her father held a high social rank but lacked any real authority or political influence.
When her family fell into debt, lower-ranking aristocrats would offer loans to gain favor through their prestigious name.
The text notes that these nobles lent money solely to facilitate their own promotion to higher social ranks.
Licia reflects on her family's notoriety and notes that her parents' marriage was strictly a cold political arrangement.
Her mother was a direct descendant of the prestigious Vertigo line, the source of the family's ancient name.
Licia explains that her father was the spouse who married into her mother's family to secure his own position.
In their country, titles could only be inherited by males, making a male heir essential for the family's future.
A close-up shows her mother's face as she struggled with the immense pressure of trying to conceive a child.
While her mother struggled, her father had a secret affair and fathered a child with his own mistress. Her father cruelly blamed her mother for their lack of children, shouting at her during their many bitter arguments.
He attempted to adopt the mistress's child as the heir, but her mother successfully blocked the plan from happening.
A faceless girl in a yellow dress represents the illegitimate daughter born from her father's secret scandalous affair.
Narrative text explains that the child was a girl who bore an uncanny resemblance to her father's mistress. The mistress demanded to be hired as the nanny, while her mother maintained control over all domestic matters.
An extreme close-up focuses on her father's back, emphasizing the distance and tension within their broken family.
When his plans were thwarted, her father demanded a divorce, facing her mother in a dark and void-like atmosphere.
Her mother accepted the child into the home, believing that no child should suffer for their father's sins. A tender image shows the mother holding a baby, demonstrating her compassion toward an innocent girl in need. Her mother never fully recovered from giving birth and passed away when Licia was only 7 years old. Child Licia looks on sadly as she reflects on her mother's kindness and the protection she provided her.
Her mother's final wish was for Licia to become the successor and live a life of true happiness.
Immediately after the funeral, her father married his mistress and moved her and her daughter into the mansion.
He fired all the loyal servants who had served her mother, forcing them to leave with their few belongings.
The estate butler oversaw the management of the family mansion and land for many years.
Licia recalls being a young girl and relying on the butler for guidance and support. The butler educated young Licia and assisted her in performing the duties her father neglected.
Forced to handle administrative work since childhood, Licia spent countless hours at a desk.
While Licia worked, her father, stepmother, and stepsister ignored all responsibilities to enjoy themselves. For years, the neglectful couple did nothing for the lands while Licia managed the paperwork.
Discovering the misuse of tax funds left Licia feeling deeply frustrated by her family's corruption.
The corrupt administrator overseeing the land focused entirely on amassing personal wealth and gold coins.
Despite Licia's efforts, the greedy administrator and her father's authority blocked any real progress.
The angry commoners unfairly targeted Licia with criticism, associating her with her family's poor reputation.
Exhausted and unappreciated, Licia struggled under the weight of her family's mismanagement and neglect. She desired recognition for her economic improvements, yet her mother's legacy cast a long shadow.
To the public, Licia appeared to be a useless daughter despite her hidden, tireless efforts. Licia jeopardized her own health working for a family that viewed her with utter contempt.
Her stepmother and sister worsened the situation by spreading malicious rumors to fuel public frustration.
The two women plotted to strip Licia of her status as the family's next successor. After the relatives sided with the stepsister, she was officially recognized as a legitimate successor.
They favored the stepsister because they believed she would be a more controllable, submissive puppet.
Ultimately, her father publicly renounced her, labeling her as a useless and untrustworthy family member.
Even after being cast aside, Licia remained burdened with the overwhelming workload of the estate. Lack of sleep and constant stress took a visible toll on her physical appearance and health. Conversely, her sister maintained a perfect appearance by squandering the family fortune on herself. High society noblewomen ridiculed Licia, claiming she did not belong in their prestigious social circles. The red-haired Duke sits elegantly on a velvet sofa while calmly enjoying a cup of tea.
The Duke joins the Vertigo family for a formal tea meeting in their grand drawing room.
The stepsister steals a quick glance toward the Duke, clearly intrigued by his powerful presence. Lycia looks noticeably uncomfortable and anxious during the tense meeting with the high-ranking noble. Maintaining his composure, the Duke takes a slow sip of tea while observing the family. Lycia finds herself momentarily awestruck by the Duke's incredibly refined and elegant mannerisms.
Turning his attention to the head of the house, the Duke addresses Count Vertigo directly.
Count Vertigo responds with visible nervousness, acknowledging the Duke's superior rank with an anxious reply.
In a shocking move, the Duke officially proposes marriage to Lycia in front of her family. The Duke remains perfectly composed while the weight of his sudden proposal settles over the room. A heavy silence fills the drawing room as the family processes the Duke's unexpected request.
The stepsister continues to watch the Duke, her expression a mix of curiosity and subtle calculation.
Feeling the pressure of the moment, Lycia gulps nervously while sitting opposite the powerful man. The Duke casually drinks his tea, seemingly indifferent to the shock his words have caused.
Setting down his cup, the Duke politely compliments the quality of the tea they served.
Lycia internally scoffs, knowing they serve their best leaves, which are likely mediocre to him.
She assumes he is merely being polite, as their finest tea is probably ordinary to someone wealthy. Lycia keeps her gaze lowered, feeling small despite the high honor of the Duke's proposal.
The stepmother boasts about their tea's rarity, while Lycia internally begs her to stop the embarrassment.
The Duke correctly identifies the cheap tea by name, mocking their attempt to pass it as rare. When the stepmother dismisses the Duke's comment, Lycia wishes she could be as oblivious as her.
Lycia realizes the Duke knows exactly how cheap the tea is and fears his true intentions. Sneering, the Duke sarcastically remarks on the difficulty of serving such impressive tea to a Duke.
Realizing the insult, Count Vertigo desperately apologizes and tries to de-escalate the Duke's obvious mockery.
The Duke insults the stepmother's past as a harlot to explain her lack of proper education.
He further insults the stepsister's manners, blaming her poor upbringing on her mother's scandalous background.
The Duke refocuses the conversation on his main objective, his official marriage proposal to Lady Lycia.
Count Vertigo is surprised and confused by the Duke's mention of the Vertigo family's history.
Duke Claude explains that their family's lineage justifies establishing marriage ties between their two houses.
Count Vertigo asks why the Duke specifically chose Lycia as his bride over other options.
Smirking, the Duke asks the Count who he would suggest as a better marriage candidate.
Narrative text notes the Count would prefer his oldest daughter, the family's official next successor.
Count Vertigo praises Agnes's beauty and her high reputation within the circles of high society. He claims Lycia's appearance is inferior to Agnes's and unsuitable for a duchess's prestigious rank.
The Duke notes that Agnes resembles her mother, who likely captivated many hearts previously.
Lycia reflects on her stepmother's gluttony and predicts Agnes will eventually share her mother's appearance.
The Duke demands to know if Count Vertigo was listening to his earlier explanation.
He emphasizes his preference for superior lineage and his refusal to marry into a lower-ranked family.
Agnes protests the insult to her education and begs for a chance to prove herself.
Lycia wonders why Agnes is arguing after the Duke explicitly ordered her to remain silent.
Annoyed, the Duke orders the Count to dismiss his rude daughter from the room immediately. The Duke requests a private meeting with Lady Lycia, suggesting the butler remains as chaperone.
Count Vertigo and his wife look stunned, while Agnes appears deeply upset by the rejection. The unwanted family members leave the room, closing the double doors behind them as they exit.
Alone now, the Duke sighs in frustration, questioning how they expected him to enjoy such tea.
He calls the Count incredibly stupid while Lycia listens to his disgruntled mumbling in silence.
The Duke expresses jealousy toward those who are easily pleased by poor quality things like that tea.
Setting his cup down, the Duke decides to address the main reason for their private meeting. Lycia politely thanks the Duke as he identifies her as the only worthwhile family member.
He bluntly admits his marriage proposal is a matter of personal convenience rather than romantic desire.
Lycia asks the Duke if he is currently being troubled by the people in his life.
The Duke explains that outside pressures are becoming exasperating and are negatively affecting his professional responsibilities.
He needs a wife who excels in some way, making Lycia the perfect candidate for him.
He admits he realized the Count's lack of intelligence when he removed Lycia as his successor. The Duke thanks the Count's stupidity for allowing such a lucky opportunity to come his way.
He demands an immediate answer from Lycia, stating he is too busy to visit her again.
Lycia realizes the Duke has planned everything carefully and understands exactly what he is trying to achieve. She considers her grim alternatives, remaining a servant, being sold, or marrying into an awful family.
Lycia asks the Duke if he expects her to fulfill the traditional duties of a duchess. The Duke explains that his staff manages everything and he doesn't require her to bear children. Skeptical of such an easy arrangement, Lycia asks what she must provide in exchange for this.
The Duke tells her to simply enjoy herself and provides a social fee for her personal use.
He asks Lycia if she has any personal requests of her own before they finalize things.
Lycia raises a finger, stating she has one specific condition she would like to ask of him.
She requests an extravagant life of complete leisure where she is not required to do anything. Finding her lack of greed interesting, the Duke grants her request and asks for her final answer.
Surrounded by roses, Lycia happily agrees and asks the Duke to officially make her his wife.
Claude appears visibly unsettled by her bluntness, causing Lycia to find his reaction quite rude. Well, that's one way to ruin the romantic atmosphere.
As the scene shifts outside, Licia asks if he is truly comfortable with their marriage arrangement.
She wants to avoid a future divorce since she never intends to return to her family home.
Claude dismisses the rumors about her, stating her family is likely the source of her problems. Narrative text notes that the Duke just mentioned the malicious rumors circulating through the local high society.
Licia is surprised that the Duke bothered to investigate her despite his lack of romantic interest. Narrative text explains the rumors label her a lunatic who is completely out of her mind.
Licia recalls her formerly poor physical condition, describing her hair as frizzy and her face lifeless.
Narrative text notes that while her blue eyes were memorable, they only added to her creepy appearance. Exhausted and stressed, Licia reflects on how Licia reflects on her former workload had severely worn out her body.
Licia reflects on her exhaustion, wishing she could sleep instead of attending social parties.
The stepsister used Licia as a plain comparison, forcing her into social events without choice.
Narrative text explains the malicious rumors claiming Licia was squandering the family's growing assets.
Licia laments how her father received all the praise while she bore the blame.
Duke Claude offers a property division in case of divorce, provided she is not responsible.
Licia finds the Duke attentive, but notes his assumption that their marriage will eventually fail. The red-haired Duke warns Licia that she will inevitably face trouble by becoming his wife. Licia eagerly accepts her new duties, focused solely on the promise of food and sleep.
Surrounded by roses, Licia suddenly feels an urgent desire to finalize the marriage immediately.
Licia asks about the wedding date while acknowledging a basic ceremony is likely impossible now. Claude announces a wedding in 2 days using a special certificate, leaving Licia visibly shocked.
The Duke promises to handle the arrangements, telling the stunned Licia to just show up.
Narrative text explains that the kingdom requires several mandatory steps for a couple to marry. The formal process includes multiple contracts and ceremonies conducted under the church's strict supervision. These complex and time-consuming marriage procedures apply exclusively to the prestigious noble families. Mandatory fees for each step prevent couples from skipping parts of the formal process.
Legal loopholes exist, such as the special marriage certificate that Claude mentioned using earlier.
Staring ahead, Licia wonders exactly how much money the Duke paid for such a certificate.
Claude emphasizes his lack of time, while Licia views the proposal as her escape route. Licia assumes her bad reputation made her the only candidate willing to accept this rush.
Claude explains that his secretary will be the sole witness, which Licia finds quite pitiful.
Licia asks if her parents should attend, but clarifies she doesn't care if they're invited. The Duke leaves the choice to her while they both acknowledge each other's difficult lives.
The two future spouses lock eyes in a tense moment of mutual understanding and silence.
Close-ups show the angry mouths of the Count and his wife surrounded by dark thorns.
Agnes rages against the news, but Licia remains completely unaffected by her family's insults.
A close-up of Licia's eye shows a glimmer of new determination and focus. Licia stands tall in a detailed blue gown, ready to move toward her new life.
Licia hugs her mother as a child, reflecting that this is the best path forward.
She believes her mother would eventually understand her choice to leave the toxic family home. As the butler also leaves, Licia assumes the family is happy to be rid of them. Claude and Licia exchange vows and rings during their formal and elegantly appointed wedding ceremony. The scene shifts to the Grand Lindbergh Castle as Licia begins her life as a duchess. On her first morning, Licia looks unexpectedly grim while contemplating the assassination of her husband. The title card appears as Licia internally resolves to get rid of the Duke immediately. A close-up shows her eating heartily, noting that her dark circles disappeared after 7 days. Sitting at a massive table, Licia decides to kill her husband to escape her boredom. She imagines pushing Chibi Claude downstairs to inherit his assets through a staged accident. Licia envisions a future with a new heir to escape the terrible food she receives.
Looking at a bowl of cold porridge, she blames Claude for her recent poor treatment.
Claude assigned a useless maid who refuses to help Licia dress or clean the room. Left with a basket of laundry, Licia is forced to wash her own clothes in secret.
She uses the survival skills taught by the butler to perform the maid's grueling manual tasks.
While scrubbing fabric, Licia questions why a duchess must live like a common servant. The blonde woman struggles with the heavy laundry, wishing she could spend her time sleeping instead. Licia is horrified by the highly nutritious but completely flavorless porridge served for her meals.
She finds the meal inedible and salty, noting that even her former family ate better.
Spotting the maid giggling, Licia realizes the mistreatment is happening under her husband's direct orders.
After finishing her terrible meal, Claude offers to introduce Licia to the rest of the servants.
The chamberlain, Rockdell Ferber, introduces himself politely, having served the Duke's family for many generations.
Licia observes the man's precise bow, noting its striking similarity to her former family's butler.
Licia politely returns the greeting, maintaining her elegant composure in her elaborate blue and white gown.
Lady Miriam is introduced as a widow and former subordinate's wife who manages the household affairs.
Licia offers a warm greeting to Lady Miriam, who responds with a cold, dismissive acknowledgement instead. Duke Claude explains that Lady Miriam's sickly daughter also resides in the mansion's private annex building. Lady Miriam subtly brags about her daughter's intimacy with the Duke and his father, Lord Andre.
Claude recognizes the power struggle and resolves to show Lady Miriam who truly holds the authority.
Licia cheerfully invites the daughter to visit anytime, causing Lady Miriam to look visibly stunned and displeased. Claude demands Miriam show respect to his wife and orders her to assign Licia a maid. Claude takes Lucia's hand for a tour, leaving a resentful Lady Miriam standing alone behind them.
As they ascend the grand staircase, Claude notices Lucia's curiosity and invites her to ask questions.
Lucia questions Claude's tolerance for Miriam, but he clarifies his father invited the widow to stay. Claude explains that his father, Lord Andre, has a soft spot for helping supposedly helpless widows.
Licia realizes Miriam was the former Duke's mistress and remains in the house for humanitarian reasons.
Having lost influence under Claude, Miriam desperately schemes to make her daughter the next Duchess instead. Lady Miriam's blatant ambition for her daughter's marriage is represented by a stylized portrait on a card. Text recalls Claude's earlier warning about the various hassles Lucia would face as his new wife.
Licia realized too late that the Duke was referring to internal domestic issues rather than social ones.
Reflecting on her situation at dinner, Licia realizes Claude intentionally had Miriam choose her personal maid.
Chibi Licia is annoyed that Claude knowingly led her into this difficult domestic trap for marriage.
Narrowing her eyes, Lucia laments that her current reality is far from her desired dream life.
Licia feels overwhelmed as she imagines Lady Miriam and her daughter turning her life into a nightmare.
Narrative text notes that it's just another day for Licia to handle her own laundry.
Dressed as a maid, Licia finds unexpected happiness while scrubbing fabric in a wooden tub.
Licia found a maid uniform in her closet and, despite Miriam's likely harassment intent, feels relieved. Miriam sneezes while Licia maliciously resolves to make full use of the gift Miriam intended for harassment.
Disguised as a servant, Licia chats with other maids while doing laundry to gather valuable household intel.
Despite her workload, Lucia's appearance improves thanks to high-quality bedding and the highly nutritious servant's gruel. A blue-haired maid sighs with envy at the young, disguised Duchess's effortless vitality and smooth skin.
Lil, a 25-year-old maid, complains about her aging skin while asking for the teenage girl's age.
Lila, a 19-year-old maid, expresses deep jealousy, and Lena, an 18-year-old maid, interrupts the beauty talk to ask if they heard the housekeeper's latest outburst.
The maids explain that Lady Miriam is losing control and taking her frustrations out on the household.
Chibi Licia listens intently, realizing the servants are providing her with crucial information about her rival, Miriam.
The maids reveal that Claude's frequent absence infuriates Miriam because it prevents her from gaining more power.
Lil notes that despite Miriam's confidence, the Duke has never shown any romantic interest in Lady Elise.
Lil points out that Miriam's daughter, Lady Elise, has already reached the age of 23 this year.
Lila confirms that Lady Elise is widely considered a social spinster within the kingdom's elite high society. Lena recounts how Lady Elise returned home devastated from a royal tea party before the Duke's marriage. The princess publicly humiliated Elise for lacking class and trying to flatter the Duke at her age.
Licia understands that the princess's harsh example encouraged other noble ladies to shun the desperate Lady Elise.
Lila suspects Elise is faking illness, which reminds Lucia of the Duke's suspicious comments about her health.
Still in disguise, Licia asks the maids how things are between Lady Elise and the new Duchess. The maids assume the Duchess is powerless, while Licia realizes she needs more intel to change things. The laundry maids head to the cafeteria for lunch, and Lucia eagerly follows to get her nutrition. Licia finds the servants' food delicious and enjoys being able to eat as much as she wants. The maids confirm they hate Lady Miriam and express their sincere hope to support the new Duchess. Lil explains with rage that Lady Elise's malicious lies were the reason they were demoted to laundry. Lena reveals that Elise claimed they were negative influences just to have them stripped of their positions. Lila notes they endure the household's toxic culture of betrayal only for the fair pay and easy work.
Chibi Licia reacts with visible shock and alarm as a spiky black burst surrounds her.
During a meal, the laundry maids discuss the extra workload caused by Lady Elise's upcoming tea party.
Lucia listens while eating, learning that Elise invited higher nobility to secure her social standing. Chibi Licia is annoyed that Elise never bothered to seek the Duchess's permission for the party. Lena prepares to leave with a tray but stops to offer Licia a parting gift. The orange-haired maid hands a surprised Lucia a bag of cookies tied with a red ribbon. Lena encourages the newcomer to enjoy the treat, explaining she received it from someone else. Touched by the gesture, Licia thanks Lena as the maid reaffirms their budding friendship. Lila and Lil prepare to clean the villa while asking about Licia's current work assignment. Chibi Licia lies about her duties while Lil expresses relief that Lena avoided the selfish Elise. The scene shifts to the exterior of the mansion annex where the cleaning will take place. While carrying brooms outside, the maids explain how to avoid being recognized by the resident nobility. Still in disguise, Licia considers sneaking into the annex to finally see the mysterious Lady Elise. Overhearing news of Claude's sudden return, Licia panics at the thought of being caught in costume. Licia quickly makes an excuse to leave, hoping to avoid her husband in the vast mansion. Turning a corner, Licia runs directly into Duke Claude, who is dressed in full formal attire. Licia immediately bows low to hide her face, desperately wishing he would just walk past her. Her heart racing, Licia remains frozen in a deep bow as Claude stops directly in front of her. Seeing the Duke's boots stop, Licia nervously wonders why he isn't continuing down the hallway. Claude smirks down at his wife, mocking her unique choice of attire for the day.
The Duke asks why his wife is silent, demanding to know how her past month has been.
Framed by roses, Claude mockingly asks if Licia enjoyed her life of leisure without any responsibilities.
Chibi Licia sighs in frustration, lamenting that this is the worst possible timing for a confrontation. Standing tall, Licia wonders how he recognized her, while Claude notes her remarkably improved complexion. Claude leans in intensely, questioning if Licia is playing a game to pass her boredom.
Grabbing her arm, Claude demands to know exactly what business his disguised wife is handling.
Claude's expression turns suspicious as he asks if she is involved in something too dangerous to share. Lifting her chin, Claude emphasizes that a husband and wife should never keep secrets from one another. Claude whispers into her ear, teasing her about her adorable voice and his desire to pick on her. Lucia struggles to break free, telling the Duke to hold on as he maintains his firm grip. Lucia tries to redirect him toward Elise, but Claude dismisses the girl as an unimportant distraction. Claude pulls Lucia closer, suggesting they find a private room together to spend his free time. Laughing at her hesitation, the Duke pulls her into a tight embrace to change her mind. Surrounded by blooming roses, Lucia's heart thumps wildly as her husband holds her in his arms. Lucia is paralyzed by the Duke's proximity, noting how incredibly close his face is to hers. Claude suddenly spots someone, and Lucia realizes she was used as bait to lure Elise out. Lady Elise arrives in a flashy gown, leaving Lucia resentful of her husband's manipulative tactics. Chibi Lucia realizes the flirtation was a trap while Claude questions Elise about her supposed illness. Elise ignores the comment, smiling as she explains she came to see the Duke herself. Claude dismisses Elise, using his urgent matter with his wife as an excuse to leave. Elise expresses disgust at Claude's interest in a lowly maid, urging him to find better entertainment. Claude's eyes turn icy as he coldly warns Elise that she has forgotten her place. The Duke forbids Elise from using his name, reminding her that only his wife has that privilege. Claude reminds Elise she is merely a tenant, leaving the young woman devastated by his harsh tone. Desperate, Elise claims the former Duke viewed her as a daughter to maintain some level of authority. Claude insults Elise's mother, causing the girl to wonder if the new Duchess has stolen his heart. Staring at Licia, Claude admits he is capable of love while telling Elise to face reality. Elise refuses to accept the truth, insisting that Claude is only acting indifferent because they've grown up. Elise vows to become the family's protector, claiming Lucia is failing her duties as a duchess. Chibi Lucia reacts sarcastically to Elise's declaration while being held firmly in Claude's protective embrace. Claude sighs and decides to leave. Elise begs him to stay, demanding he abandon the servant. Claude rejects her invitation, warning her that she is stepping out of line. The red-haired Duke warns Elise that he will not tolerate her behavior if she continues to shame his family. Lady Elise is left trembling and speechless after receiving a cold, stern warning from the Duke. Elise claims Lord Andre will protect her. Claude is unfazed, admitting he inherited his father's taste for younger women and finds Lucia's reactions intriguing. Lucia is annoyed that Claude is using her as a pawn to provoke Elise's anger without any filter or discretion. Lady Elise groans in frustration as she stands between two maids while watching Claude and Lucia walk away together. A young aide screams in panic as Claude orders him to summon a tailor and jeweler to the mansion immediately.
Claude places a massive stack of papers in front of Lucia, who is startled by the sudden influx of difficult work.
Chibi Lucia is horrified and shocked by the overwhelming amount of documents her husband expects her to process alone. The young aide gasps in horror as he watches the Duchess being buried under a mountain of administrative paperwork. Chibi Lucia looks toward the viewer with a desperate, pleading expression, silently asking for help with the mounting documents. The brown-haired aide looks on with a sweat drop, unable to offer any assistance as the Duchess faces her tasks. Claude explains her lifestyle depends on her performance. Lucia realizes he deliberately provided poor conditions as a test, making her want to retaliate. The Duke explains his absence was meant to humble the interlopers. Since it failed, he forced Lucia to start from the bottom to reclaim her power. Staring flatly at her husband, Lucia is completely unimpressed by his self-praising explanation of his manipulative and testing behavior. Reviewing a document, Lucia asks if Claude's only goal is to remove Miriam and Elise from the household. Claude asks for suggestions. Chibi Lucia wonders if he is being serious or simply playing a game for his own amusement. Lucia notes several servants are problematic but manageable. She asks if Claude intends to keep the Chamberlain, Rockdale, in his position. Claude gives his wife permission to dismiss him if she has a better replacement. Lucia notes Rockdale is a cunning old fox within the house. Framed by roses, Rockdale is identified as an ambitious man who originated from the Lindbergh family himself. A flashback shows Rockdale and a young Andre running together, having been raised as master and servant to foster a lifelong bond. Rockdale is acknowledged for being highly skilled at his duties, earning him respect and good pay despite his hidden ambition.
Rockdale's ambition led him to neglect his duty to advise his master. He used Miriam and Elise as pawns to infiltrate the dukedom for his own gain.
Rockdale planned for Miriam to become Andre's mistress to eventually usurp the family title. Lucia notes a proper Chamberlain would never allow such blatant misconduct. Lucia reflects on Lord Andre's incompetence and pursuit of pleasure, noting Claude was primarily raised by his mother and grandfather instead. Claude is overwhelmed with work. Lucia notes he is cautious about a new Chamberlain because Rockdale hoarded power and trained no successors. Rockdale is depicted amidst dark, thorny branches, illustrating his manipulative and selfish control over the household staff and internal affairs. While looking for a candidate, Lucia realizes that one specific person comes to mind as the ideal new Chamberlain. An elderly man with glasses greets Lucia, noting that a long time has passed since they were last in each other's company. Ragnath Odd, the 70-year-old former chamberlain of Count Vertigo, introduces himself to the reader with a polite, formal bow. Lucia expresses her sincere apologies for interrupting the elderly man's peaceful retirement to ask for his professional assistance. Ragnath smiles warmly, telling the Duchess that returning to work for her is actually his ideal version of retirement.
Lucia introduces Ragnath to Claude. The Duke recalls seeing the man at the Vertigo mansion in the past.
Ragnath confirms his identity and explains he retired when Lucia married into the Lindbergh family due to his advancing age. Lucia expresses high respect for the man who raised her, believing he is the only one capable of matching Rockdell's cunning influence. The Duchess formally decides to introduce her trusted mentor to Claude as the perfect candidate for the Chamberlain position. Claude slides a document across the desk, offering Ragnath a position if he can agree to the family's specific terms.
Surrounded by a radiant light, Ragnath solemnly pledges his absolute loyalty and service to the Lindbergh family for the rest of his life.
The Duke welcomes him, inviting him to use his power for personal benefit as well. Ragnath accepts the offer. Chibi Licia observes with a sweat drop that the two men seem to click together surprisingly well from the start.
Ragnath immediately begins working through the massive pile of documents, earning a word of thanks from the grateful Chibi Claude.
Ragnath mentions his habit of staying informed about noble families. He asks the Duchess if she would like to assist with the workload. Exhausted after a week of reading documents forced on her by Claude, Chibi Licia complains that the paperwork never ends. Ragnath moves to take a seat, ready to fully commit to his new role within the Duke's busy office. Claude promises the family stamp after an assessment, tasking Ragnath with handling all future paperwork for the entire household. Ragnath processes the documents at an incredible speed. Lucia feels like her presence in the room is no longer necessary.
Ragnath inquires about the hiring process. Claude explains Rockdell oversees it. Ragnath warns that firing Rockdell's men will cause a staff shortage.
Claude considers hiring top students from training schools but fears that a sudden mass replacement will spark rumors and suspicion.
Ragnath suggests using the tradition of a new wife firing old servants. Lucia refuses. Ragnath then proposes crashing Elisa's tea party to assert dominance. Claude enthusiastically agrees with the coincidence of their thoughts, while Chibi Licia reacts with visible annoyance at his cheerful response.
Ragnath praises Claude's quick thinking while the Duke basks in self-praise before addressing the Duchess. Exhausted by the heavy workload, Licia asks Ragnath to address her by her name. Ragnath asks if Lucia has a handmaid. She admits hers is Miriam's informant. Ragnath suggests replacing her. Claude notes he has loyal allies. Claude suggests bringing the candidates over, while Ragnath expresses his desire to meet with them personally. Ragnath mentions his connections. Claude realizes he's being tested. Ragnath denies this, praising the Duke's legendary competence. Claude asks Ragnath to find several individuals to replace the large number of servants they'll dismiss. Ragnath agrees to search for experienced mentors to oversee the training of the incoming new graduates. Ragnath asks the Duke if they should finalize the adjustments to the current employment contract. Claude decides to leave the contract as it is for now, suggesting tweaks can happen later.
Licia marvels at how Claude and Ragnath can read, write, and converse simultaneously at high speeds.
Chibi, Licia, and Diego are stunned by the otherworldly mental processing speed of the two men. Ragnath notices Licia and Diego have stopped working and calls them out for their lack of progress. Holding a document, Ragnath gives a subtle, knowing grin that unsettles the Duchess and the aide. Licia and Diego sweat as they realize that nobody can challenge Ragnath's terrifying level of efficiency. Lil, a blue-haired maid, introduces herself as a top graduate from Lambert Academy with years of experience. Lila, a pink-haired maid, introduces herself as a specialist in massage and professional beauty treatments for nobles. Lena, an orange-haired maid, introduces herself as a top graduate from Shinnok Academy, ready for service. Narration explains that graduates from these elite academies are automatically recognized as being highly efficient staff members. The narration notes that graduating at the top grants opportunities to serve the imperial family directly. Shinnan Academy is described as a vocational school that specializes in producing the world's most elite maids.
A line of faceless maids in uniform represents the high standard of staff training at the academy.
Ragnath formally assigns the 3 skilled maids to Licia and asks if she approves of the arrangement. The red-haired Duke closes his eyes and tells Ragnath that the final decision is Licia's call. Chibi Licia feels awkward because the 3 maids clearly knew her true identity from the start. Licia realizes the maids have been helpful informants while they bow and pledge their dedicated service. The Duchess smiles warmly and offers her sincere thanks to the 3 newly assigned personal handmaids. Lil asks for permission to start her duties by tidying up the room and dressing the Duchess. Ragnath gives the maids permission to proceed, eager to witness their legendary professional skills in action. A stunning white gown adorned with blue bows is presented by the window, ready for Licia. Licia is completely shocked by the maid's incredible speed and the high level of her skills. Lil urges Licia to remove her low-class dress, insisting it is not suitable for a Duchess. Lila suggests a bath and massage to treat Licia's dry skin after her long, busy week. Lena offers her assistance while Licia questions if they should clear the air before moving forward. Licia asks the 3 maids if they truly knew her identity the entire time she was disguised. The maids explain that they knew immediately because a uniform cannot hide a person's noble disposition. The maids list her smooth hands and noble posture as obvious signs that revealed her true identity.
Lil reassures Lucia that they have kept her secret and nobody else knows of her true existence. Chibi Lucia feels insulted while the maids aggressively prepare her for a battle in the household.
The scene shifts to the bathroom window where someone asks the Duchess for her honest opinion.
Relaxing in a rose-filled bath, Lucia finds the treatment to be incredibly refreshing and deeply soothing. Lucia admits she finally understands the appeal of self-care and would gladly indulge in it every day.
Reflecting on her goals, Lucia realizes she just wants a simple life with food and nap time.
Lila prepares to massage Lucia's scalp and asks which hair oil the Duchess would like to use.
Chibi Lila gently massages Lucia's scalp as the Duchess sinks deeper into a state of relaxation.
Chibi Lina assists with the grooming while Lucia enjoys the high-level service provided by her new handmaids. Chibi Lil helps Lucia into a light blue robe as the pampering session comes to a close. Lila carefully applies makeup to Lucia's face while the Duchess rests comfortably in a plush chair.
A door creaks open, signaling that someone is entering the room to see the finished results.
Claude and Ragnath enter the room and are visibly surprised by Lucia's stunning and refreshed appearance. The red-haired Duke gazes at his wife with a pleased smile, admiring her newly restored beauty. Ragnath compliments Lucia, noting that her beauty strongly reminds him of her late mother.
Lucia takes a decisive step forward, her white dress rustling with the sudden movement.
The Duchess looks ahead with a subtle, confident smile as her preparations finally conclude.
Adorned in a white gown with blue bows, Lucia stands ready to face the household. Ragnath praises her natural beauty, insisting that she is radiant enough to forgo any makeup. Chibi Lucia admires her reflection, pleasantly surprised by the dramatic change achieved in mere hours.
Diego stands paralyzed by Lucia's transformation, struggling to find words as he gasps in shock.
Diego whispers a compliment while Chibi Lucia finds his flustered reaction adorable and teases him.
Claude smirks, eager to use their resources to transform Lucia into an undeniably elegant Duchess. The Duke views Lucia as a vital pawn for the upcoming confrontation at Elisa's party. Ragnath informs Lucia that she has only 2 days to master every essential Duchess mannerism. Ragnath reminds a bewildered Lucia that her new position demands she learn about her family.
The Chamberlain explains that despite the rushed wedding, she must fulfill her promises to the family.
Lucia accuses the men of scamming her, arguing that duty and a job are identical burdens. Ragnath insists duties and jobs differ, prompting Lucia to complain about the two men teaming up. Claude dismisses her complaints, telling her it is time to fulfill her duties as his wife. Chibi Lucia fumes over the unfairness, while Ragnath critiques her lack of household management knowledge.
Ragnath presents a new desk claiming her future tasks are simple compared to the Duke's.
Ragnath reveals he has been collecting information on the Lindbergh family specifically for Lucia's benefit. Lucia stares in disbelief, thinking that all this extra work is completely and utterly unnecessary. Lucia silently curses the Duke, hoping he someday experiences the same exhaustion she currently feels.
Despite her inner turmoil, Lucia maintains a graceful and poised appearance in her new attire.
A determined look enters Lucia's eyes as she prepares for the first phase of her plan.
Lucia vows to eliminate the Duke's worst nightmare to protect the comfortable lifestyle she desires.
Chained by duty but driven by self-interest, Lucia walks toward her next target with resolve. The three maids react with pure joy, telling Lady Lucia she looks absolutely gorgeous and radiant. Lucia observes her new salmon-colored gown, realizing it perfectly represents the colors of the Lindbergh family.
Lena explains that Claude gave specific orders for the dress, though Lucia suspects purely practical motives.
A sudden knock at the door interrupts the maid's praise, catching the Duchess's immediate attention.
Claude enters and offers a compliment, though he asks Lucia to look more genuinely pleased.
The group gathers by the carriage as Claude and Lucia prepare to depart for the bray.
Ragnath offers his best wishes, confident that Lucia's intensive training will serve her well today.
Lucia responds with a nervous smile, promising to do whatever she can to succeed. Claude stops suddenly, remembering a final detail he needs to address before they leave together. The Duke presents a small chest filled with Lindbergh family heirloom jewelry for Lucia to wear.
Claude decides to personally assist Lucia with the jewelry, ensuring the heirlooms are displayed correctly.
Lucia grows flustered as Claude leans in closely to fasten the red gem earrings on her.
The Duchess realizes with a blush that she and Claude are standing in an uncharacteristically intimate proximity.
Claude expresses his approval while Lucia struggles to ignore the frantic pounding of her own heart.
Ragnath interrupts the moment with a loud cough, signaling that it is time to move on. Ragnath urges the couple to hurry, while Lucia reminds Claude their marriage is purely political. At the tea party, noble guests admire the lovely garden and Elisa's hosting skills.
A guest invites Elise to an upcoming ball, specifically requesting that she attend with Duke Claude.
Another lady seeks Elisa's friendship, extending an invitation to another gathering to secure her favor.
Elise basks in the attention, certain that this event will cement her status as the Duchess.
Elise recalls a maid who previously distracted Claude, vowing that such interference will not happen again.
Lucia arrives unexpectedly at the garden party, catching every guest off guard with her stunning presence.
Elise turns in shock as Lucia claims she was simply guided by the group's cheerful voices.
Lucia politely asks about the occasion, noting that she was never informed about today's garden gathering.
Lucia confronts Elise directly, pointing out the woman's failure to pay respects to the new Duchess.
Lucia questions what authority and permission Elise has to hold a gathering in the mansion.
Lucia asks about her missing seat while Elise stares at her in complete shock. Michelle offers her own seat to the Duchess, politely addressing her as Your Grace.
Lisha thanks the black-haired lady for her kindness in offering her a seat at the table.
Michelle introduces herself as the daughter of Marquis and Dredka to the gathered noble guests. Lisha expresses her pleasure in meeting Michelle and hopes for a future friendship between them.
Lisha recalls that Michelle was the only one who didn't mock her at previous parties. Lisha formally announces her name as Lisha Lindbergh to the stunned garden party guests.
Elise rudely rejects the claim, calling Alicia a delusional maid playing house with Lord Claude.
Elise continues her insults while Michelle tries to defend the Duchess's status to the crowd.
Elise calls the scene a tragedy ruined by a commoner who manages domestic matters.
Lisha slams her book down and commands Elise to hold her tongue immediately.
The brown-haired woman stammers in disbelief at the Duchess's sudden and forceful confrontation.
Lisha threatens to arrange a marriage for Elise as punishment for her extreme disrespect.
Elise orders the Duchess to leave, accusing her of making a fool of herself publicly. Lisha declares Elise's existence intolerable and mocks her lack of education and status.
Michelle agrees that Elise doesn't know her place despite being a mere Viscount's daughter.
Michelle chuckles, suggesting that Licia should rear the delusional girl into the correct path.
Licia reminds Elise of her low rank and her lack of support from powerful families.
Lisha questions if Elise has truly confused herself with the position of a duchess.
Close-up of Elise's wide eyes showing her intense anger and disbelief at the situation.
A black text bubble emphasizes the demand for someone to move out of the mansion.
Lisha's blue eye stares coldly as the order to vacate the premises is issued.
The Grand Mansion stands tall as the demand for Elise to vacate is declared.
Lisha offers a significant dowry to any man who volunteers to marry the disgraced Elise.
The noblemen at the party look away awkwardly, avoiding eye contact with the Duchess. Lisha mockingly observes that Elise appears to be quite unpopular with the local gentlemen.
Licia announces that Count Gersh, a wealthy mine owner, will be Elise's future husband.
A close-up of Elise's eye reflects her absolute horror as her fate is decided.
Elise desperately denies the news, claiming Claude and Lord Andre would never allow this.
Lisha calmly tells Elise to settle down while explaining her husband helped find the husband.
A hand reveals a sealed letter confirming that Lord Andre has agreed to the arrangement.
Elise collapses and crumples the letter in despair as she realizes her fate is sealed.
Licia stands poised and triumphant while the defeated woman trembles at the tea table. Licia playfully suggests a group wedding for Elise's friends, causing them to flinch in terror.
The other noblewomen frantically protest, claiming they are not worth the Duchess's precious time.
Licia smiles gracefully while wishing the terrified noblewomen a great future marriage.
Chibi Licia looks surprised as she notices the Duke's sudden arrival at the garden party.
Claude arrives in his military uniform, stunning the crowd with his handsome and confident appearance.
Claude embraces Lisha while she internally rages about his perfect timing and audacity.
Elise begs Claude for help, but he tells her to gather her belongings immediately.
Claude orders maids to escort Elise to her room until she is collected later.
Licia claps her hands and officially ends the garden party due to the marriage news.
Lisha turns her attention back to Michelle, acknowledging her as a potential ally and friend.
Lisha invites Michelle to attend her upcoming tea party, extending a hand of friendship.
Michelle bows and expresses her deep honor at receiving an invitation from Lady Lindbergh.
Relaxing later, Lisha asks Claude if she effectively demonstrated her authority to the guests.
Lisha reflects on the consequences Elise will face for her previous actions in the household.
Lisha asks the Duke how his own tasks went while she dealt with the Barty.
Claude explains that he reassigned the butler Rockdale to work for the Vertigo family napkin.
Lisha worries that dismissing a servant with knowledge of family secrets might be unwise.
Claude explains that the butler had limited education and lacked deep knowledge of house affairs.
Narrative text reveals the previous master trained his staff minimally to prevent potential betrayals.
The late Duke left the matter for Claude to handle personally upon taking control.
Alicia expresses her gratitude for the experienced chamberlain provided to assist her current needs.
Claude smiles and thanks his wife for finding Ragnath and bringing him into their family.
As Lisha speaks of needing allies, Claude pulls her into a sudden and intimate embrace. Claude kisses Lisha, catching her completely off guard and leaving her face a bright red.
Lisha pulls back in total shock, her mind racing as she processes the sudden kiss.
Claude notes that she finally looks her age now, further flustering his startled young wife.
Chibi Licia fumes with intense anger, demanding a clear explanation for his previous remark.
Claude reminds her they must be affectionate alone, admitting he finds her innocence very tempting.
Licia internally panics, realizing that her first kiss has been taken away without her permission.
Licia considers demanding responsibility, but ultimately decides she would rather just slap him. Claude gives Licia another small kiss while she remains stubbornly annoyed by his playful behavior.
Licia firmly declares that romantic intimacy will never be a part of their relationship again.
Overwhelmed by her own embarrassment and frustration, Licia covers her face and screams. Later, while wearing a blue gown, Licia asks her maid Lil for the current time.
Lil informs the Duchess it is time for afternoon tea, a ritual nobles perform twice daily.
Narrative text notes that tea and sweets are essential components of high-class ladyhood.
A vibrant selection of cakes and pastries is presented for the afternoon tea service. Licia looks down in confusion, asking what the large stack of papers in her hands represents. Lil confirms they are documents, causing Licia to cry over her missing afternoon dessert.
The maids explain that Ragnath strictly forbade serving her sweets during her study sessions.
While drinking tea, Licia laments that everyone is giving her extra work instead of comfort.
Claude approaches in the garden, commenting on the pleasant breeze to his visibly grumpy wife.
Licia bluntly denies the existence of any breeze while maintaining a flat, unamused expression.
A gust of wind proves Claude correct, causing Licia to resent nature's apparent favoritism.
Claude takes his seat and asks Ragnoth to pour him a cup of tea. Ragnoth agrees immediately, preparing to serve the Duke as Licia watches with silent annoyance.
The Chamberlain carefully pours the hot tea into a cup for the resting Duke.
Closes his eyes in quiet satisfaction, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of the garden.
Claude praises the tea and asks Ragnoth to bring a confection to eat with it.
Claude mockingly decides to pass on the sweets, claiming he feels bad for his life.
Licia forces a strained smile while asking her husband why she cannot have any treats. Claude laughs, explaining that desserts were not included in the terms of their marriage agreement.
Licia stands shocked and speechless, frustrated that he is using their contract against her.
Resigned to her situation, Licia sighs and accepts that she won't be having any sweets.
Claude reveals he confiscated her secret stash from Diego, while Licia criticizes his ungentlemanly intrusion.
Claude clarifies he simply ordered Ragnoth and the maids to remove the hidden snacks for him.
Chibi Licia stares blankly at her three maids, realizing they have betrayed her secret.
The maids avoid her gaze and laugh nervously as Licia processes their betrayal.
Licia suggests reviewing their legal agreement, and Claude asks Ragnoth to produce the documents. The Duke proposes getting straight to the point regarding their various mutual duties and obligations.
Licia argues she was promised a bare minimum lifestyle, which should include regular afternoon tea.
Claude calls her naive regarding noble life and reminds her she hasn't fulfilled all duties.
Claude offers a deal rewarding sweets for attending or hosting various high society tea parties.
Licia stares in grim silence as she realizes the Duke is bribing her with food.
Claude mentions a more permanent way to secure her status, which piques Licia's curiosity.
Claude suggests she bear his child, a proposal that Licia immediately and firmly rejects.
Licia considers that hosting a tea party is a pain but worth it for the Zur.
Claude asks if she has other concerns and suggests renewing their agreement when something arises.
Licia laughs as she reminds her husband that he originally waived her duty to conceive.
Licia asks why he'd want her in bed if not for children after he mentions contraception.
Ragnoth apologizes for the awkward topic as Claude realizes Licia is still quite innocent.
The Chibi Duchess demands to be included in the conversation after being dismissed as naive.
Michelle enjoys her tea during the peaceful afternoon gathering in the vibrant mansion garden.
A formal introduction card identifies Michelle as the 19-year-old daughter of Marquis Andrat.
Chibi Licia celebrates, realizing a party of two technically fulfills her duty for sweets. Michelle compliments the gorgeous garden and admits the mansion's atmosphere takes her back.
Licia agrees and expresses a cautious desire to become friends with the young noblewoman.
Michelle asks how much the Duchess knows regarding her current social standing and reputation.
Narration explains the political divide between the Imperial Party, the Royal Party, and neutral nobles.
New aristocrats often find themselves targeted by Her Highness due to their middle ground position.
The faceless nobles stand in somber silence, representing those caught in the political crossfire.
These individuals serve as easy targets for the high-ranking elite to vent their various frustrations.
Lower-ranking ladies were frequent targets until Lady Michelle stepped in to provide them with protection.
Because of her protective actions, Michelle is technically categorized as a member of the anti-royal party.
Licia correctly guessed that Michelle sought her friendship to gain the powerful Lindbergh family's support.
Michelle admits she saw an opportunity, while Licia realizes her guests group is being attacked.
Support from the Lindbergh family would effectively shield Michelle's group from any future royal interference.
Duke Lindbergh's neutral status and unique relationship with the Emperor make him a vital ally. Licia surprises Michelle by suggesting they attend the upcoming tea party at the Imperial Palace. The Duchess insists they act quickly to address the current social and political tensions. Michelle smiles and agrees with Licia's bold plan to attend the Royal Social Deck.
Michelle expresses her deep appreciation and asks for the Duchess to attend the upcoming party.
The two women look forward to meeting again at the upcoming royal tea party.
Later at the mansion, Licia pleads with Claude to accompany her to the palace event. Claude mentions he will be working but agrees to stop by the palace briefly. Licia finds his sudden kindness suspicious, noting he usually demands a condition for every favor.
Claude asks for details about her meeting with Michelle and if they became allies.
Licia worries that picking a side might negatively impact the Lindbergh family's social standing.
Claude reassures her while Licia reminds him to fulfill his end of the bargain regarding sweets.
The Duke acknowledges her request, knowing full well how much she desires her promised confections.
Chibi Licia glows with pure joy at the thought of finally receiving her afternoon treats.
Claude notes her unusual excitement, prompting Licia to explain the massive importance of sweets.
The Duke laughs softly, seemingly amused by his wife's intense passion for simple desserts. Licia grows wary, wondering if Claude's kindness is a mask for a hidden secret.
Licia gasps as she considers if Claude intends to make Michelle his official mistress.
Narrative text questions if the Marquis would accept such a low status for his daughter.
Claude stands before a silhouette of Michelle as narration asks about his potential hidden leverage.
Licia contemplates the absurdity of protecting a mistress who also leads their social group. Claude asks what she is thinking, leading Licia to ask if Michelle is his mistress.
Claude's expression turns cold as Licia suggests he is very interested in the young noblewoman.
Licia cites his uncharacteristic kindness as evidence before Claude suddenly slams his hand down.
Startled, Licia watches as Claude admits he was merely curious if her first party succeeded. Claude strides forward, declaring he will return to his usual, less-than-kind behavior toward her.
A close-up captures Licia's wide-eyed shock as the atmosphere between them shifts dramatically.
Claude pulls her close, remarking that kindness clearly isn't the best way to bridge their distance. Claude vows to correct her horrific assumptions about his relationship with Michelle as Licia panics.
Licia urges Claude to wait, claiming her previous comment was just a simple misunderstanding. She explains that despite their short 2-month marriage, she trusts that the Duke would never be disloyal to her.
Claude questions where she got such an absurd idea, prompting Licia to nervously admit she was only joking. Claude bluntly states the joke was not funny and gave him goosebumps, much to his wife's surprise.
Licia asks if anything happened with Lady Michelle, but Claude claims he has no idea. After he lets her go, Licia notes that he isn't acting like himself, as he would normally try to kiss her.
Chibi Licia frantically clarifies that she does not actually want a kiss and is simply relieved to face no consequences.
Claude gazes out the window and asks Licia how familiar she is with Her Highness, the princess.
Licia explains that while the princess is beautiful, she has a strong personality and wanted to marry Claude. She notes her family was barred from royal parties, so she only saw the woman once.
Claude mentions that the Emperor and Empress adore the princess so much that even her royal tutors go easy on her.
Claude notes that the eldest prince was the only person who would scold her, but his absence leaves her completely unchecked.
Licia suggests that the princess would be married to Claude if she truly got her way. Claude calls her sharp, but explains that marriage into the Lindbergh family is impossible for the royal daughter.
Claude explains that the former empress was his grandmother, making them close relatives. He asks if Licia understands the implications of close relatives marrying, and she confirms that she is very much aware.
Claude reveals that while the Emperor understood the biological issue, the Empress and Princess refused to give in, claiming it was not a sufficient reason to prevent a marriage between them.
Licia asks if the royals have always demanded that Claude marry the princess while they review documents together.
Licia observes Claude's expression and concludes that he truly had no interest in marrying the royal princess.
Claude sighs, stating he is not asking Licia to do anything because the royals know better than to cross his family. Licia is surprised, having assumed he wanted her to handle the woman.
Claude notes that the palace is huge, so they can leave quickly after greeting the hosts. Licia looks on with a nervous expression.
Licia arrives at the extravagant tea party in a massive red gown, marveling at the gorgeous attendees.
Licia notices the other noblewoman gasping in shock and fleeing the area as soon as she arrives.
Claude asks what she did to the other guests, but a confused Licia insists she does not even know them.
Claude looks toward the entrance and announces that the host of the party is finally arriving.
The Empress and Princess Lindette descend the stairs, both dressed in elaborate gowns for the social gathering.
The faceless noblewomen gossip among themselves, expressing shock and disbelief over the specific dress the princess is wearing.
A close-up of the red-haired princess captures her chuckling to herself during the tense social event.
Claude tells his wife it is time to go, and Licia agrees as they prepare to greet the royals.
Claude bows and thanks Her Majesty for the invitation, apologizing for the late introduction of his wife. He formally presents Licia Lindbergh to the Empress and the assembled guests.
Licia introduces herself as a member of the Vertigo family, but the Empress coldly demands that the Duchess show her face.
The Empress deems Licia satisfactory, noting she resembles her mother and possesses looks worthy of the Duchess Lindbergh title.
Licia thanks Her Majesty, promising to support her husband and the Lindbergh family while asking for the Empress's kindness and guidance. Princess Lindette interrupts the conversation, smiling as she expresses a desire for her and Licia to become good friends.
Licia narrows her eyes in suspicion as she observes the princess's overly friendly behavior. Licia grows wary, realizing that the princess intentionally interrupted her formal conversation with the Empress. Claude suggests that the princess should change her dress if she wants to be friends, noting that crimson is a color traditionally reserved for the Duchess of Lindbergh.
Claude argues that wearing the color implies the princess refuses to acknowledge Licia's status. The princess looks shocked while Licia is impressed by Claude's defensive stance.
The Empress asks Claude to stop, claiming Lindette had no ill intent and simply chose a dress color that complements her red hair. Licia realizes the Empress's remark implies the crimson color does not suit her. She feels increasingly uncomfortable under the woman's piercing gaze. Licia prepares herself for the social conflict ahead, wondering how she should best fight in this metaphorical battle.
The princess smiles as the Empress hides behind her fan while the room fills with a buzz of gossip.
Licia notes they are at a disadvantage and decides to stay put while her husband handles the conversation with Her Majesty. Claude closes his eyes and dismisses the color choice, stating it is merely a red dress.
A close-up reveals a subtle, knowing smile on the Empress's face as the conversation continues.
Claude declares that if the princess chose the color knowing they would attend together, he must accept it as a challenge against his family.
Licia panics at Claude's blunt words, while the Empress glares and the princess stares at him in total shock. The princess laments that they would have been together if not for their close relation, calling the situation a tragedy. Licia tells Claude to stop his intimidating glare, but the Duke declares he is extremely satisfied with his smart, beautiful wife. Licia internally wonders if he just paid her a compliment.
Narrative text notes that Claude has made it clear he will not forgive anyone who tries to harm his wife.
The princess grits her teeth in fury while the Empress watches. Licia realizes she must show appreciation for Claude's public support. Smiling through her frustration, the princess excuses herself and notes that other guests are waiting to greet the couple. Grand chandeliers and red drapes decorate the palace hall, setting an opulent tone for the royal tea party.
Narrative text identifies the red-haired woman as the princess of the kingdom.
Narration explains she is the princess of the continent's strongest kingdom, whose discovery of her true nature would tarnish the royal reputation.
Licia deduces the Empress needs Claude to prevent Princess Lindette from marrying abroad.
Lost in her thoughts, Licia gasps when Claude suddenly asks if she is all right. Claude checks on his wife and she quickly confirms she is fine while pushing. Claude points toward Lady Michelle, suggesting they go over to greet her and her group.
Michelle asks to be excused to join her friends who are waiting nearby.
Claude allows Michelle to leave, announcing that he must also depart for a short time.
Michelle's group of friends waits together across the room, watching the interactions from afar.
Michelle looks back with a charming smile, appearing pleased by the current social developments. Licia greets Lady Michelle warmly as Claude stands stoically behind his wife. Claude bids Licia farewell, stating he is going elsewhere for a moment.
Cloud whispers for Licia to meet him when the palace bell rings 7 times.
Licia accepts the instruction but wonders why Michelle would know Claude's office location.
Suspicion flickers in Licia's eyes as she watches Claude leave with Michelle's influence lingering.
Michelle begins to introduce her inner circle of noble friends to the new Duchess. Michelle introduces Amanda, daughter of Viscount Leroy, Reese, daughter of Count Rudolph, and Matilda, daughter of Count Sidra.
Matilda, the purple-haired noblewoman, smiles pleasantly during the formal introductions to the Duchess.
Licia introduces herself as the Duchess of Lindbergh and invites the ladies to use her name.
Licia notes their beauty and wonders why the princess would target such a seemingly friendly group.
Narrative text observes the ladies look strong enough to reconcile even if a fight breaks out.
Licia expresses her surprise to Michelle, noting that the group doesn't seem harassed at all.
Licia questions Michelle's previous claims of distress, seeing her friends laughing and enjoying themselves. Chibi Amanda offers tea and cake, casually reassuring Licia that the food has not been poisoned.
Matilda promises to deal with the princess, leaving Licia feeling she is a very dependable ally.
The noblewomen invite Licia to join their future tea parties, expressing their enjoyment together.
Amanda reveals they spend their time plotting against the princess, startling the polite Duchess. The ladies praise Licia's graceful handling of the princess, but Licia admits she was just scared. Matilda and Amanda debate the fun of fighting the princess while Licia watches them bewildered. Reese apologizes for startling Licia, noting that the princess must be humiliated by the Duchess's beauty.
Licia eats her cake, feeling moved by the unexpected kindness of her new noble acquaintances.
Michelle expresses a sincere desire for them to become close friends and confidants.
Licia agrees, asking Michelle for her guidance as she navigates the complexities of high society.
The atmosphere turns joyous as the group of women shares a laugh in the garden. A shared moment of laughter cements the new bond between the Duchess and Michelle's group.
The loud, echoing ring of the palace bells suddenly interrupts the festivities. Realizing it is time to meet Claude, Licia excuses herself from her new companions.
Michelle offers to show Licia the way, claiming her father's position makes her familiar with the palace.
Licia recalls Michelle's father as the head of foreign affairs, explaining her knowledge of the halls.
Licia decides to trust Michelle, figuring it is safer than wandering the massive palace alone.
Michelle mentions Claude's office is nearby as Licia reflects on having earned the lady's trust.
Narrative text reflects on Licia's past naivete regarding her trust and the current situation. The scene shifts to an empty, luxurious corridor, adorned with grand chandeliers and portraits. Michelle and Licia walk through the vast halls, highlighting the immense scale of the palace. Narrative text notes that new palace recruits often get lost and require rescue by senior workers.
Michelle confidently leads the way, boasting about her excellent sense of direction within the palace.
Licia admits she is easily lost, appearing grateful for Michelle's assistance in finding the office. 2 stern guards block their path, declaring the hallway ahead is strictly off-limits to guests. Michelle identifies Licia as the Duchess, explaining she is there to see her husband, the Duke.
Michelle expresses suspicion, questioning if they are real guards since she has never seen them before.
A guard explains they were stationed urgently to escort guests during the large tea party. Michelle stubbornly demands the guards confirm their presence with Duke Lindbergh directly. The Imperial Guard nods in acknowledgement as they prepare to move through the palace.
One of the guards dashes away quickly to carry out his newly assigned orders.
Licia notes that Michelle is performing tasks typically reserved for household servants and feels grateful yet awkward. Michelle simply grins. As they reach a set of large doors, the guard whispers to a colleague while the ladies wait. Michelle smiles brightly and offers to personally lead Licia to the Duke's private palace office. Michelle laughs about having an Imperial Guard escort, while Licia notices how much she is enjoying the social power play.
The doors open with a sharp click, revealing a lavish room that catches the Duchess by surprise. Silence fills the opulent, empty room, which is decorated with fine furniture and massive, empty gold frames.
Michelle asks where the Duke is, and the blonde guard apologizes while asking them to wait inside for him.
Licia grows suspicious, doubting the guard's claim that Claude ordered them there since she recognizes it as Lord de Brete's room.
Michelle questions the room's ownership, but the guard insists she must be thinking of a different location entirely.
Michelle insists her father forbade her from entering this specific room, causing the guard to grit his teeth in frustration.
The blonde guard suddenly grabs Licia's arm, causing her to gasp in shock and alarm as he moves.
Michelle slaps the guard's hand away, calling him a lapdog for the Imperial family and demanding he know his place.
The guard threatens them, while Licia panics about the illegal use of weapons in the palace. Michelle looks on thoughtfully.
Michelle decides they must comply for now, pulling Lucia into the room despite the Duchess's visible hesitation and worry.
Standing alone in the lavish room, Lisha asks Michelle what their next move should be in this situation.
Michelle notes Claude warned the princess and admits she never thought the woman would attack inside the palace during a party.
Licia urgently asks Michelle to explain the true nature of the dangerous situation they have been forced into.
Michelle offers to explain high society's players, noting Lucia's lack of familiarity with the imperial palace and its politics.
Michelle identifies the men as the princess's personal imperial guards. She notes the princess thought Licia was naive and easy to trick.
Licia realizes she would have been easily deceived alone, wondering how guards could act so treacherously against a guest.
Michelle calls the ambush an opportunity, noting Claude won't forgive this and teases Lucia for being so loved by him.
Michelle explains that Lord Debris is a radical leader who is dangerously obsessed with the thought of saving the princess.
Michelle finds Ibreed's methods disappointing compared to novels she has read. Lucia tells her she has read too many books.
Despite her mockery of the villain's tactics, Michelle expresses her hope that the Duke will arrive to rescue them.
Lucia begins to worry if this situation is actually a trap set by Claude to use her as bait.
Lucia recalls Claude's promise to protect her but fears he might still be using her as a pawn again.
Lord Ebert enters with a smug smile, while Michelle identifies him as the Count's disposable third son used by the princess.
Ebert orders the guards to seize the women and makes a lewd comment that Michelle immediately and coldly rejects. Michelle declares she has no interest in men, leaning in close with a sinister eye as she prepares her move.
Proclaiming her preference for women, Michelle suddenly shoves the blonde guard back with surprising explosive force as her hair whips.
Michelle reveals her fan is made of steel and weighs 2 kilograms, warning the guards of the immense pain it causes.
Michelle mocks the knight's weakness, claiming she would be a superior warrior and questioning how they can call themselves knights.
Michelle winks at the Duchess, telling Lucia to stay put while she handles the combat herself with a grin. With a swift motion, Michelle strikes out at the guard, moving with practiced and lethal precision in her gown.
Michelle taunts the guard, asking if he is truly afraid enough of a vulnerable lady like her to run. Michelle mockingly encourages the guard to draw his sword, showing no fear of his status or his weapon.
The guard draws his weapon just as the door is slammed open, shocking the 4 occupants of the room.
Claude bursts into the room while Michelle delivers a triumphant strike to the guard. Claude calls out Michelle's name in surprise.
Claude stands with his guards, sternly demanding to know what is happening in the room.
Licia realizes Claude was unaware of the situation and wonders why he addresses Michelle so informally as he crouches down.
Claude checks to see if Licia is all right, and she quickly reassures him that she is unharmed.
Claude helps a wobbling Licia to her feet, insisting they leave for their quarters if she is able to stand. A close-up captures Licia's wide-eyed reaction as her husband softly speaks her name with a look of genuine concern.
Michelle notes Claude keeps his promises even if he is an awful person. Licia thinks he is an awful, trustworthy man.
Michelle teases Claude for being overprotective. Claude stays silent and tells a blushing Lucia he is taking her to rest.
Claude leads Licia to a bed, reminding her that she never skips her necessary daily nap and should sleep.
As a maid closes the curtains, Licia reflects on the day's events and the many questions she has for Claude.
Licia finally closes her eyes, drifting into sleep after the exhausting and dangerous events of the palace tea party.
Licia wakes up and yawns, noting that she had a very good sleep.
She stands up from the bed, still feeling a bit drowsy from her rest.
Licia gasps upon seeing the darkness outside, realizing she slept much longer than intended.
She quietly opens the bedroom door, heading into the main room of the guest quarters. Claude notes she is finally awake and remarks that her nap was quite a long one.
Licia apologizes for oversleeping. Claude asks if she is hungry, but she says she is fine.
Sitting down across from him, Lucia asks when they will be heading back to their home.
Claude explains he had matters to resolve while she slept, making it too late to leave.
Licia asks if there is an available guest room in the palace for her views.
Claude reminds her that as a married couple, sleeping separately would cause rumors of a rift. Licia offers to sleep on the sofa, but Claude insists they share the bed without incident. Licia pouts with distrust. Claude suddenly changes the subject by asking if Michelle is her type. Claude gazes at her intently with his red eyes as he waits for her confused reaction.
Lucia explains she only likes men and will only be friends with Michelle. Claude looks skeptical.
Licia looks on, still failing to understand the hidden meaning behind her husband's cryptic words. She asks him what exactly he thinks she should know about her new friend Michelle.
Claude reveals Michelle is biologically male. A shocked Lucia shouts in disbelief at the sudden news.
Claude explains the truth is a family secret and Michelle himself was the one who confessed.
Licia wonders how she was supposed to know. Claude thought she found Michelle's secret identity attractive.
Licia admits she only attended the party to be a good friend and avoid social neglect.
Claude teases her for being easily swayed. Licia asks why he protected her from the royals.
Licia admits she suspects him of plotting. Claude notes she even suspecting him of Claude.
Claude explains it is his duty to protect her and stand against the imperial family's nonsense.
He notes she dislikes parties and would never attend another if he didn't support her now. Lucia is surprised that his motivations for defending her were so simple and protective in nature. Claude suggests the party was worth it because she successfully made several influential new lady friends.
Licia falls into thought as she processes the complex dynamics of her husband's recent actions.
Claude places a document onto a large stack of paperwork, continuing his late-night administrative work.
Claude claims he must push her to act, as he believes people must work to live properly.
Lucia recalls the horrible food he served her.
Claude says it was strictly for her nutrition.
Claude admits the early challenges were tests to see if she was capable of being his duchess.
Lucia objects to his use of the word work. Claude repeats he needed a suitable partner.
Lucia wonders about the person who recommended her to such a demanding and difficult husband.
She recalls the negative rumors about her family and questions who would speak well of her.
Claude admits her inner toughness caught him off guard, but ultimately suited the role of duchess.
Lucia demands the truth about her benefactor's identity, asking once more who introduced them to Claude.
Claude explains he felt bad hearing Lucia had to lead her family from a very young age.
Lucia asks for the reason behind his unexpected sympathy for her difficult and lonely childhood.
Claude explains her situation reminded him of his own strict upbringing under his grandfather's watchful eye.
He notes that while he was the heir, he had no actual authority or personal responsibilities.
Claude recalls having freedom during his youth that Licia was never allowed to experience herself.
A flashback shows a young Lucia buried under a mountain of paperwork at her family's desk. Lucia realizes Claude wanted her to experience the fun and social life she missed as a child.
Claude agrees but reminds her of her adult duties, though he promises to be more lenient.
Claude says he needed a capable wife to manage the house. Licia asks for the name again. Claude stays silent, implying the answer is obvious as Licia's eyes widen with a dawning realization.
They both realize that Ragnath was the one who orchestrated their marriage for Lucia's own sake.
Claude reveals Ragnath wanted her to have a decent husband before his own health eventually failed. Claude touches her shoulder, noting her servant's loyalty. A tearful Licia is deeply moved by Ragnath. Licia looks at a vision of Ragnath, acknowledging he is the only true family she has. Licia reflects on the common regrets of life and her mother's wish for her happiness.
Claude explains that Ragnath acted strictly to protect Alicia because he was merely a servant.
Claude speculates that Ragnath saw Lucia's mother and her and wanted to prevent a similar marriage.
Claude reveals he introduced Michelle to protect Licia from the massive high society politics. Licia realizes Claude and Ragnath were colluding from the start, which the Duke calmly acknowledges. Licia questions if the Duke was truly comfortable letting a servant orchestrate such a major life on that.
Claude explains he accepted the arrangement because Licia was qualified and Ragnath promised total loyalty.
Claude bluntly states he would have simply divorced her if the arrangement had proven unsuccessful. Claude asks Licia for her honest opinion on how their marriage has progressed so far. Licia admits she hasn't forgiven him yet, but credits him for understanding her true self. Claude observes that Licia thrives on physical activity and challenges rather than a stagnant lifestyle. Claude offers to let her step back from her duchess duties if she still wishes to. Licia asks if they would divorce if she stopped working. Claude surprises her with a rejection.
Claude teases Licia, questioning why she thinks he would kiss someone he found unattractive.
Claude laughs, admitting he was tempted to teach her more but managed to restrain himself. A moment of silence follows as the weight of the Duke's playful admission lingers. Licia gives a strained, nervous smile while processing her husband's surprisingly flirtatious remarks. Licia wonders why she felt a sudden chill after hearing the Duke's cryptic words. Licia recalls Michelle's words about Claude's reliability and decides to trust her husband for now. An extreme close-up captures Licia's eye as she contemplates her next move with deep intensity. Licia notes she sought a second opinion from Ragnath to verify everything the Duke claimed. Licia knocks on the office door, determined to hear the butler's side of the story.
Ragnath sits at his desk in the library, diligently working on documents before the Duchess.
Ragnath shares his perspective, which aligns perfectly with the explanation previously provided by the Duke.
Ragnath explains his primary goal was for Licia to follow her heart through diverse experiences.
Licia realizes Ragnath's criteria for her husband were focused entirely on financial stability and assets.
Licia begins to feel a sense of sympathy for the Duke after hearing the butler's schemes.
A close-up of Ragnath's eye highlights his focused and perhaps somewhat guilty expression during the talk.
Ragnath formally apologizes for the deception he maintained until today regarding the marriage arrangement.
Ragnath admits he was supposed to retire but ended up working for the Duke instead. Licia asks which side Ragnath would take in an argument. He remains non-committal and neutral.
Licia complains about Ragnath's refusal to favor her, finding his impartiality incredibly frustrating.
A knock at the door precedes Claude's entrance as he checks if their meeting is over.
Ragnath offers tea to the Duke and the black-haired guest standing directly behind him.
Licia is visibly confused, questioning whether she should address her friend as a lady or lord.
Michelle formally introduces himself as Michel Roux and asks the Duchess to use his name.
Michelle explains Roux is his mother's maiden name, which the Duke arranged for him to use. Michelle reveals he cut ties with his family because they treated him as unpaid labor.
Licia listens silently as Michelle promises to share the rest of his story another time.
Claude announces that Michelle will be working for them to protect him from his former family.
Claude explains Michelle is assigned as Licia's personal guard for her future outings as Duchess.
Michelle enthusiastically agrees, looking forward to cross-dressing and girl talk at future tea parties.
Michelle asks Licia to consider him a partner and offer him advice on dealing with Claude.
Michelle cheekily asks to be included if Licia ever decides to commit vengeance against anyone.
An awkward silence falls over the tea table following Michelle's blunt and bold requests.
Claude sighs at Michelle's problematic personality while Michelle threatens to reveal the Duke's deepest secrets.
Licia sips her tea, already feeling exhausted by Michelle's high energy and challenging personality.
Licia glances at a smirking Claude, suspecting he assigned Michelle to her just to avoid him.
Licia trembles with rage, realizing the Duke pushed a problematic person onto her like extra work.
Licia sits with a fuming expression, while Ragnath watches her with a pleasant, subtle grin.
Claude stands with Michelle, whose lively and cheerful presence contrasts the Duke's stoic demeanor.
Michelle waves enthusiastically at the secretary, greeting him and expressing hope for a productive partnership.
Diego sits at his desk as Michelle requests his patience and kindness during their work together. An awkward silence permeates the office as the two men exchange a long, wordless look.
Michelle tearfully accuses Diego of forgetting him, while Claude advises the secretary to ignore the outburst.
Michelle dramatically complains to Claude about his rights being violated before threatening to tell Lady Licia.
Claude questions Michelle's familiarity with his wife, while Diego begs to be excluded from their spot.
Michelle explains his desire for friendship stems from a lack of male companions, annoying the hardworking Diego.
Diego admits he originally mistook the exceptionally pretty man for a woman dressed in men's clothing.
Diego acknowledges his colleague's gender, but confesses that the man's beauty still makes him blush uncontrollably.
Michelle insults Diego's popularity with women, leaving the secretary feeling deeply wounded and emotionally stabbed.
Michelle warns that women are constantly plotting, suggesting that the secretary will always be unfortunate in love.
Diego sighs over the useless advice, feeling increasingly irritated by the man he finds incredibly gullible.
Michelle points out a mathematical error on the document, causing the startled Diego to drop his guard.
Michelle remarks that Diego has much to learn while boasting about his own superior administrative and calculating competence.
Michelle Rue formally introduces himself as a secretary and guard while prioritizing his status as Licia's best friend.
Michelle leans in close to ask if a specific reminder would help Diego remember his true identity.
Michelle reflects on cutting ties with his family to become a simple guard for the Duke's household.
Claude firmly reminds Michelle of his lower status, prompting a playful rebuttal about the Duke's sulky attitude. Michelle shifts to a serious tone as he prepares to present information regarding the palace ambush participants.
Claude carefully reviews the detailed report provided by his new secretary concerning the recent attack on Licia. Diego reflects on the gag order regarding the ambush and the imperial family's inability to ignore the situation.
Michelle apologizes for endangering Licia, while Claude reflects on the danger his wife faced despite the quick resolution.
Claude reveals he gathered top-secret information on Licia's likes rather than simply asking the household staff for help. Michelle asks if Claude is satisfied with the information or prefers to focus on building his own relationship.
Claude reminds Michelle of their professional hierarchy while the secretary maintains he is just being honest with him.
Diego urges Michelle to stop provoking Claude, noting the Duke's extreme sensitivity regarding anything related to Lady Licia.
Michelle bids Diego farewell as Claude dumps another massive stack of paperwork for the secretary to handle alone.
Diego laments his low position as the Duke leaves to visit Licia, abandoning him with all the work.
The exhausted secretary despairs as he realizes he must spend the entire night finishing the Duke's administrative tasks.
Ragnath appears in a vision, repeating his advice that Licia should follow her heart in all her endeavors.
Licia reflects on her future, struggling to find a meaningful goal within the already prosperous and developed territory.
Michelle encourages Licia to embrace more selfish desires while she contemplates the development of her family's former land.
Licia admits her only true desires were simple comforts like delicious food and a chance to rest. Michelle insists a duchess should splurge daily, but Licia finds the idea of constant excitement utterly draining.
Michelle admits the lavish lifestyle isn't to his own taste either, despite it being a common dream.
Michelle continues his point, asserting that Licia surely understands the potential for fun within her high position.
Licia stands by the fountain, taking a quiet moment to absorb the guard's perspective on her role. Licia decides it is her responsibility to stimulate the economy since she possesses such immense personal wealth. Michelle enthusiastically proposes starting a business, but the Duchess immediately rejects the idea of being more busy.
Michelle suggests Licia only provide the project outlines and leave the actual labor to her capable, idle husband.
Licia notes Claude has been joining her for tea frequently while pining for the overworked and suffering Diego.
Michelle suggests they enjoy the beautiful weather outside since Licia rarely leaves the confines of the mansion.
Licia decides to use her extra time to learn about the Lindbergh family history rather than simply resting.
Michelle encourages Licia to rest, while an internal voice notes that Michelle himself should try working more often.
Licia agrees to go outside, prompting Michelle to ask if he can borrow one of her personal handmaids.
Licia looks back at her friend, wondering why he would need one of her personal servant's assistants.
Licia glows with happiness as she displays her beautiful new purple dress, admiring the intricate floral design.
A maid strikes a confident pose, enthusiastically confirming that the Duchess's new look is a total success.
Licia smiles at her reflection, realizing that dressing up makes her happy in a way she never before understood. A maid informs Licia that everyone is waiting. The Duchess prepares to join them.
Michelle Rue, disguised in a blonde wig and dress, enthusiastically calls for Licia to depart.
Licia stares at the cross-dressed guard with a look of stunned and silent disbelief. Licia secretly finds Michelle's disguise adorable while wondering if others have noticed his drengr.
Michelle twirls happily, boasting about the expensive new dress he successfully built as a household expense.
Claude advises Licia not to bother arguing, noting that Michelle is talented yet incredibly exhausting.
Licia awkwardly agrees with her husband's assessment of Michelle's problematic yet capable personality.
Licia stares intently as she contemplates her husband's warning regarding Michelle's exhausting nature.
Claude bids his wife a safe journey. Licia warmly thanks him before leaving the mansion.
A transition filled with vibrant roses marks the beginning of the Duchess's secret journey. The carriage sets off toward the imperial city under a bright and sunny sky.
Michelle asks if he looks cute. Licia laughs, noting his disguise is perfectly convincing.
Michelle questions Licia's choice of attire before she expresses concern about the Andret family's reaction.
Michelle explains that his wig allows him to pass as Licia's sister during their outing.
Narrator text explains Michelle's confidence that his disguise will allow him to guard Licia unnoticed. Narrator text expresses a hope that Michelle isn't cross-dressing simply for his own enjoyment.
Licia watches the city pass by while comfortably seated inside the private family carriage.
Narrator text explains Michelle's family history and how he was born into a forced marriage.
Narrator text details the Andret family's desire for a girl to use for political leverage.
Michelle was born a boy, causing his mother great fear regarding the family's reaction.
Michelle's mother and the Marchianis decided to raise and register him as a girl instead.
Michelle asks Licia for their plan. She notes he was the one who suggested going out.
Licia admits she knows little about the city and requests Michelle provide some sightseeing suggestions.
Michelle is shocked by Licia's unfamiliarity with the city. She admits to rarely leaving home.
Michelle describes the central market's dangers and excitement while fearing Claude's reaction to taking her there.
Narrator text reflects that crowded and dangerous places are often where true excitement is found.
Licia begs to go. Michelle agrees on the condition they change into more suitable clothing.
Michelle asks about her interest in markets. Licia notes Ragna previously forbid her from visiting.
A shopkeeper welcomes them, privately suspecting that the exceptionally pretty visitors are nobles in disguise.
A blue-haired maid offers Licia various dress options while she prepares to go incognito.
The maid and Michelle, who has also changed, praise Licia's fabulous and perfect new look.
Michelle requests Licia stay close and holds her hand for safety within the dense crowd.
Michelle leads the way, excitedly promising to show Licia a specific shop he has found.
The market atmosphere is lively, filled with colorful stalls and people browsing unique wares.
Michelle leads Licia through the bustling crowd, ensuring she remains safe during their show.
Michelle pulls Licia back, warning that her important aura makes her an easy pickpocket target. Licia's wide eyes reflect her surprise at the unexpected danger within the busy market square.
Michelle explains he prevented a pickpocketing attempt and feels relieved he kept her wallet safe.
A sudden loud noise catches Licia's attention as she wonders what is causing the commotion.
Michelle suggests the crowd is gathering for some form of public entertainment at the central square.
Licia marvels at the massive crowd while Michelle urges her to watch her step carefully.
Licia's gaze is drawn toward a hidden wonder within the heart of the marketplace.
Both Licia and Michelle react with wide-eyed wonder at the sight of the adorable animals.
A cluster of adorable pets rest peacefully, unaware of the two visitors approaching them.
Michelle cradles a small kitten, delighted by how friendly the young animals are to them.
Licia admires a puppy's fluffy tail and expresses a desire to take all of them home.
Michelle explains the noble trend of purchasing small animals has finally reached the commoner markets.
Michelle notes the animals are still expensive. Licia hopes they will soon become more affordable.
Licia considers getting a pet. Michelle enthusiastically agrees and points at a kitten named Whiskers.
Licia suggests Michelle buy it. He offers to care for them if she makes the purchase.
Michelle thinks she can ask Claude, betting he will say yes to anything right now. Licia reflects that Claude is currently campaigning for her trust as they build their relationship.
Michelle presents a kitten, excitedly asking Licia if she will please take the little fellow in.
Licia finds the animal cute but firmly refuses to take it into their home.
Michelle begs her to reconsider, suggesting they take in two if she cares for one.
Licia suspects Claude favors loyalty over whimsy, but Michelle argues he loves whatever she loves.
Licia awkwardly smiles as she considers the guards' points while they continue browsing the animals.
Licia gasps in surprise as her attention is suddenly captured by a new discovery nearby.
Licia points toward a specific enclosure, having decided that is the one she truly wants.
A small white puppy growls aggressively from behind the bars of its cramped and isolated cage.
Michelle notes the creature's arrogant temperament, teasingly comparing its personality to Lord Claude's surly nature.
Licia asks to see the puppy, but the shopkeeper apologizes and strongly advises against it.
The shopkeeper explains that the white puppy is incredibly stubborn and won't open up to anyone.
The shopkeeper warns it bites everyone and reveals he plans to euthanize it in a few days.
The shopkeeper offers to show Licia something else, but she remains fixed on the aggressive puppy.
Licia firmly insists on getting that specific puppy despite the shopkeeper's warnings and alternate offers.
Michelle and the shopkeeper panic as Licia questions why she cannot take the aggressive animal.
Michelle warns that Claude will kill him if the aggressive animal ends up biting her.
Licia jokingly tells Michelle to handle it, making him cry out about their supposed best friendship.
Licia has the shopkeeper open the cage, determined to prove she won't hurt the defensive creature.
Licia reaches out her hand, but the white puppy immediately bites her finger as it growls.
Michelle cries out in concern while Licia flinches in pain but refuses to back away.
The white animal continues to growl aggressively as it stares intently at the Duchess's face.
Licia maintains a gentle smile, attempting to establish trust through her calm and patient presence.
The animal finally whimpers and relaxes as Licia continues to offer her hand without any fear. Licia beams with happiness, declaring the now gentle puppy to be absolutely too cute to leave behind.
Licia holds the puppy while Michelle insists they must take care of her injured hand first.
Lisha wonders if she should bathe the puppy later while petting it with her bandaged hand.
Michelle, now in his regular attire, questions if the animal is truly a dog at all.
Michelle notes its large teeth and intelligence, suspecting the creature is actually a wolf, not a dog. Michelle shares a sudden realization with Lucia, who turns to him with curiosity and slight concern.
Michelle suggests they confirm the animal's identity with Claude, leaving Lucia wondering what he intends to check.
Narrator text wonders what they need to make sure of as the scene shifts back home.
Diego asks if that is the dog while Claude confirms it and Michelle admits his uncertainty.
Claude hums thoughtfully, noting he has only seen a creature of this kind once before.
Lucia asks if there is a problem and requests to understand the cause of their concern.
Claude asked why Michelle kept her in the dark. The secretary explains he avoided spreading misinformation. Claude requests to touch the puppy for a moment as he moves in for a closer look.
The puppy growls at the Duke, who gives the small creature permission to continue its defiance. The white animal pouts while Claude pets it, appearing strangely submissive to his powerful touch. Claude asks Licia if she has ever heard of the rare and legendary Van Cleve animals. Narrator text explains that the Van Cleve is a rare creature whose fur is a luxury item. Narrator text reveals that Van Cleve products are exclusively sold to a select group of wealthy aristocrats. Claude looks at Licia and asks if she finally understands the true nature of her new pet.
Lucia is stunned, asking if he truly believes the puppy she found is a legendary Van Cleve.
Claude instructs Ragnath to bring his winter coat for confirmation while the butler agrees to comply immediately.
Lucia asks how he knew. Claude reveals he once slew one near Lindbergh Farm Village.
Ragnath presents the coat while Claude shows Lucia how the textures are identical to her puppy.
Licia notes the resemblance while Michelle reflects on how these mysterious animals avoided extinction despite hunting.
Michelle concludes the animals are highly intelligent, making the presence of a lone pup quite strange.
Claude believes the puppy understands their peaceful intentions and won't be harmed by them. Claude inspects Licia's bandaged finger, noting the injury occurred because she tried to pet the creature. A focused gaze reflects Claude's serious evaluation of the small animal's true and dangerous nature.
Claude warns that the puppy's teeth are dangerously sharp and could have caused a severe injury.
Claude advises Licia to be cautious while she holds the white puppy amidst a shower of roses.
Michelle questions their plan, reminding everyone that trading a live Van Cleve is strictly against the law.
Claude suggests a cover story, claiming they found the abandoned puppy after its pack left it behind.
Lucia asks for confirmation that this lie will allow them to keep the rare animal safely.
Claude confirms they can play dumb and asks if she is truly certain about keeping the pet.
Licia looks down at the white puppy in her lap, her expression filled with thoughtful hesitation. Claude remains opposed to keeping the animal, fearing its wild instincts could lead to a fatal injury.
Lucia argues the puppy is good, but Claude warns that wild animals remain unpredictable as they grow. Lucia expresses her heartfelt desire to find the puppy's mother and return him to his own family.
Claude explains that return is impossible, but Licia remains determined to try for the sake of the pup.
Licia clutches her dress tightly while looking at the puppy, reflecting on her own deep emotional past.
Narrator text expresses a poignant wish for more time and support from a mother during difficult moments. Licia empathizes with the puppy's hardships, imagining the fear of being alone and vulnerable without a mother. A gentle hand rests on Licia's head, offering a moment of comfort and shared silent understanding.
Claude promises they can reach the animal's habitat in the neighboring kingdom without needing a miracle's help.
Claude's expression softens as he looks toward Lucia during their intimate conversation about the puppy's future.
Lucia nervously asks if Claude will remain calm when they present their request to the neighboring kingdom.
Claude jokingly claims to be a man of peace while admitting he shows no mercy to enemies.
Both Lucia and Michelle express blatant disbelief at Claude's self-proclaimed status as a peaceful and gentle man.
Claude warns that the upcoming journey will be exhausting, but Lucia stoically accepts the loss of her naps. Claude enthusiastically proposes starting official work immediately for the sake of the puppy and their own kingdom.
Lucia is completely bewildered by the sudden shift in topic and the Duke's strange newfound work ethic.
Ragnath presents a sealed letter to Licia, who is surprised to receive such an unexpected formal document. Claude reveals the letter is an official request from the imperial family, sparking Licia's curiosity and concern.
Licia is shocked, questioning why Claude is now accepting a request he previously planned to decline.
Claude grins, explaining they will use the Imperial mission as a cover to visit the neighboring kingdom.
Claude details how the Imperial pressure for a wedding makes this international social event a perfect distraction.
Licia snaps at Claude, realizing he is simply excited to avoid his usual paperwork and heavy responsibilities.
Licia moves on to the practical concern of deciding what they should feed the small white puppy.
Claude reasons that the animal's high-altitude habitat suggests it is likely not a carnivore by nature.
Michelle suggests the puppy eats grass, leading Diego to question why it would live in high altitudes.
Michelle notes the shopkeeper used milk, while Diego wonders if the creature is still just a baby.
Claude points out the puppy's prominent fangs, suspecting it is capable of eating almost anything it finds.
Ragnath suggests a specific high-altitude seed called vaki, noting its extreme nutritional value and hard protective shell.
Both Michelle and Claude react with immediate recognition upon hearing the specific name of the livestock feed.
Lucia also recognizes the name Vaki, her expression indicating a past and unpleasant familiarity with the substance.
Diego stands alone in his confusion, completely unaware of the significance behind the mentioned livestock food.
Michelle pats Diego's shoulder and encourages him to broaden his horizons and see more of the world.
Claude notes Lishia's surprising depth of knowledge regarding the obscure and unpalatable livestock feed they just discussed.
Claude dismisses Diego's utility while Lucia scolds him for being unnecessarily harsh toward the hardworking blonde secretary.
Lucia explains that the nutritious grain has a terrible taste that makes her nauseous just thinking about it.
Lucia recalls surviving on the grain for a week. Claude smiles, secretly planning to make someone eat it.
Diego recalls the name vacay, while Claude explains that the seed was eventually improved for better human consumption.
Ragnath provides a botanical clarification, explaining that vacay is actually a seed that merely resembles common grain.
Michelle ponders if the Van Cleve is named after the seed it eats. Ragnath agrees it is possible.
The white puppy sleeps peacefully while Claude suggests feeding it the seed to test its dietary preferences.
Lisha asks Claude for permission to give the small white puppy its first bath. Claude agrees, explaining that the creature's species is accustomed to living in snowy climates.
Ragnath insists that Lisha cannot perform the bath herself because of her injured finger. A maid meticulously washes the white puppy inside a large water-filled wooden tub. The puppy shakes itself dry, drenching the maid and causing Lucia to react with surprise. The white puppy happily consumes a bowl filled with nutritious brown grain and seeds.
Lisha watches the puppy finish its meal of vacui seeds from her comfortable bag.
The white puppy lets out a large, tired yawn after finishing its long meal. Lisha smiles warmly, noting the puppy is likely sleepy now that its belly's full. Lisha decides to take a quick nap alongside the sleeping puppy after their day out.
The scene shifts to the bedroom where Lisha and her pet sleep peacefully together.
Lisha remains in a deep, undisturbed slumber while tucked safely under her blue blanket.
A loud, urgent shout from Claude abruptly wakes Lucia from her pleasant afternoon dreams.
Lisha's eyes fly open in shock as she is suddenly roused from her deep sleep.
Claude enters the room and pulls Lucia from bed, claiming there is an urgent problem.
Claude lifts Lisha into his arms while she protests his sudden and forceful bedroom intrusion.
Lucia questions Claude's strange behavior as he carries her toward the exit of her room.
Claude carries Lucia down the hallway while she looks around in complete bewilderment.
Lucia is stunned to see the puppy has grown significantly larger in a short time.
The now massive white wolf rests on the lawn, staring forward with sharp and intelligent eyes. The large wolf dashes forward as Claude tells Lucia to stay alert and awake.
Claude tells Lucia to hold on tight as she reacts with a startled, high-pitched cry.
Claude jumps out of a second-story window while holding Lucia and the white wolf.
Michelle is shocked to see Claude landing outside with Lucia carried securely in his arms.
Lisha scolds Michelle for laughing at her while Claude continues to carry her.
Michelle and Claude observe a giant mother wolf that followed her young pup's scent.
The white puppy jumps playfully through the grass toward the presence of its mother.
The pup approaches the massive, fur-covered paws of the mother wolf in the sunlit field.
Narrator text questions if the mother wolf has arrived specifically to reclaim her lost son.
The giant wolf licks its pup while Michelle notes they are not considered a threat.
Licia asks if the situation is her fault while Claude looks away thoughtfully. Claude reminds Lucia that she was the one who initially brought the wild animal home.
The white puppy snuggles affectionately against its giant mother's side in the soft grass. Licia reacts with comical wide-eyed shock to the sudden arrival of the massive mother wolf.
Licia is outraged that Claude is attempting to shift all the blame onto her shoulders.
Claude stands firmly with Licia in his arms before the towering and calm mother wolf. The massive mother wolf takes a slow and heavy step forward onto the grass.
Claude and Licia look toward the giant white wolf as she stands calmly before them.
A close-up shows the enormous legs of the mother wolf as she moves forward.
Licia asks Claude if it is safe for her to reach out and touch her.
Claude advises her to stop if the wolf reacts poorly, teasing her about her safety.
Licia slowly extends her hand toward the massive white-furred body of the mother wolf.
Licia gently pats the giant wolf, noting how calm and gentle the animal remains.
Claude pets the wolf's soft fur, finding it hard to believe it lives in the wild.
Licia joyfully hugs the giant mother wolf, laughing at the animal's extreme fluffiness.
Claude asks Licia what she plans to do now that she is the wolf's owner.
Licia reflects on the surreal reality of being the owner of a legendary creature.
Licia asks Claude if he can also touch the wolf as he thoughtfully considers it.
Claude begins to pet the massive creature while Licia watches with a soft smile. The mother wolf gives Claude a cold look, though he notes they aren't in danger. Claude's smug grin provokes Licia into once again loudly denying that she owns the wolves. Claude suggests returning to the mansion while the guards and Michelle follow closely behind them.
The giant mother wolf and her pup follow the group as they walk across the grounds.
Claude orders Michelle to supervise the wolves, prompting Michelle and Licia to shout in confused protest. Michelle argues that since they live in a castle, there is plenty of room for pets.
Licia expresses concern that the maids will struggle to clean up the fur from the shedding.
Licia observes that no fur has dropped yet, a fact which Claude finds quite interesting.
Michelle notes the wolves are distractions while Claude tells Licia to train her new pets.
Michelle describes how the loud, terrified shrieks of the maids recently echoed throughout the entire mansion. Terrified maids scream in panic while Licia remains fast asleep, completely undisturbed by the surrounding chaos. Claude hears the distant commotion and pauses, wondering what could be causing such a loud disturbance.
Claude focuses on the documents at his desk, momentarily distracted by the noise from the hallway.
A panicked maid flees in terror as the massive mother wolf playfully approaches her from behind.
Ragnath admits that even he was startled by the volume of the screams he heard earlier.
Licia asks about servant safety, but Claude dismisses the threat, declaring the wolves are now property.
Licia is surprised to learn the wolf had to travel through the city to find them.
Michelle and Ragnath note the lack of witnesses, suggesting the wolf likely came from the palace.
Licia realizes that a wolf from the high-altitude palace mountains makes much more sense.
The grand white towers of the palace stand prominently against a bright and clear sky.
Narrator text explains that the wolves likely originated from the steep mountain range behind the palace.
Claude asks Licia for her final decision on what to do with the two wild creatures.
Licia declares they should keep them if they cannot be safely returned to the wild.
Licia's inner thoughts reveal her true desire to keep them purely for their incredibly soft fur.
Licia fantasizes about sleeping on the giant wolf, enjoying the softness of its legendary white fur.
Claude sighs as he looks at Licia, noting that her transparent thoughts are easily read.
Claude offers to buy fur products instead, though he refuses to support her lazy pet intentions.
Claude questions how they will raise and register the animals, while Licia suggests staying on property.
Claude mentions moving to their main estate to give the high-altitude wolves the space they need.
Narrator text explains that Licia hasn't visited the Lindbergh family land since her wedding took place.
Licia worries about facing critical vassals, but Claude's invitation makes her reconsider visiting the main estate.
Licia pouts, admitting she is motivated to visit because she has questions for the neighboring kingdom.
Delicate white flowers bloom against a decorative blue background, marking a shift in the setting.
A horse-drawn carriage moves through a crowded town square as the group begins their new journey.
Licia sits quietly inside the carriage, wearing a new travel dress adorned with elegant red ribbons.
Narrator text details the unusual nature of their marriage and why they delayed visiting the estate.
Claude tries to read while the puppy bites him. Licia reflects on their long-delayed estate visit.
Licia chuckles softly, noticing how much the small white puppy seems to like being around Claude. Claude looks at the puppy biting his hand and skeptically questions if this is actually affection.
Licia giggles while playing with the puppy, who kicks its legs happily during their long ride.
Licia expresses surprise that Claude is still working on paperwork even while they are on the road.
Claude informs Licia that she needs to read through the documents before they reach their final destination.
Claude hands a massive stack of papers to Licia, who looks at the pile with bewilderment.
Licia is overwhelmed by the thickness of the documents, worrying she won't finish reading by noon.
A map illustrates the vast territories overseen by Duke Lindbergh along the kingdom's eastern border.
Text highlights the well-trained army of the Lindbergh family as a knight charges into battle.
Licia feels pleased by Claude's trust in her work but remains hesitant about the heavy workload.
Licia wonders when Claude had time to arrange everything as she steals a glance at him.
Claude notices Licia looking at him and asks her what she is currently thinking about.
Licia hesitates, appearing slightly nervous as she clutches the thick stack of documents in her lap.
Licia asks about a coal mine mentioned in the files, which Claude explains was previously abandoned.
Licia mentions hearing about coal miners causing a significant stir in the area recently. Claude explains the Lindbergh family's compensation didn't satisfy the miners who continued illegal digging.
A smug man named Rockdell plans to issue a final notice after shutting the mine. Licia questions the timing of these events and wonders about Rockdell's involvement in the matter. Holding the documents, Licia admits she is starting to feel a growing sense of dread.
Licia notes that Rockdell's name appearing in the documents is always a precursor to trouble.
Claude reveals Rockdell profited illegally from the mine, confusing Licia regarding the mine's actual profitability.
Claude clarifies that deep underground mining offered high profits but carried deadly risks like toxic gas.
Claude explains the mine was abandoned for safety, but a corrupt manager joined forces with Rockdell.
Licia realizes Rockdell manipulated the miners into continuing their dangerous work for his own gain.
Licia asks Claude if individuals like Rockdell were commonly employed as servants in previous generations.
Claude discusses his grandfather's hiring practices while Licia reflects on the family's many historical hardships.
Text reveals that the estate's current butler was once a student under their chamberlain, Ragnath.
Claude explains Ragnath's background as an instructor and how his many connections benefit the family.
Licia is thoroughly impressed by the depth of Ragnath's professional competence and extensive past experience.
Claude looks forward to the reunion between Ragnath and the butler, who is reportedly intimidated.
A close-up shows the formal attire of a high-ranking butler within the prestigious Lindbergh household.
Ragnath stands confidently before his former students in a scene reflecting on his teaching days.
Narrator text explains the practical skills and quick thinking required for a butler to manage property.
Ragnath is shown alongside another servant, highlighting the contrast between their different roles and backgrounds.
Claude explains that the estate's butler shared Ragnath's values and knew the local land intimately.
Claude describes how his grandfather secured the butler's loyalty by arranging a marriage within the family.
Claude laments that despite his staff reforms, ambitious individuals still plot against the Lindbergh family's interests.
Licia understands that Claude's visit to the estate is primarily intended to resolve these internal conflicts.
Claude suggests they pretend to be a loving couple, prompting Licia to question his specific intentions.
A close-up reveals a subtle, knowing smile on Claude's face as he considers his next move.
Claude kisses a lock of Licia's hair, teasingly suggesting they should kiss in front of others. Licia blushes furiously and loudly rejects the idea of performing a public display of affection.
Claude playfully sighs, stating he will save such romantic gestures for when they are truly alone.
Licia turns away and demands that Claude stop touching her hair in such a familiar manner.
Claude looks at his hand, privately thinking that their relationship is progressing better than he anticipated.
Licia, still visibly flustered, asks Claude what he is talking about after his strange comment.
Claude lets out a small laugh, seemingly amused by Licia's predictable and energetic reaction to him.
Claude informs Licia that their carriage has finally crossed the boundary and entered their family's land.
Licia observes the high quality of the roads, suspecting they were built to facilitate military movements.
The paved road stretches forward through lush greenery, indicating the wealth and organization of the territory.
Claude explains that their superior infrastructure and supplies serve as a deterrent to any potential invaders.
Licia agrees with Claude's tactical assessment, noting that no one wants to engage in a losing war. Text details how ambitious warlords from the Lindbergh line were historically restricted to their own lands.
A past Lindbergh leader is celebrated by his troops after successfully crushing various rebellious internal factions.
Narrator text attributes the family's enduring power to the first Duke's commitment to protecting war-torn regions.
Claude points out the vast fertile farmlands that ensure they have ample food supplies during times of conflict.
A farmer works diligently in the golden fields, representing the foundation of the duchy's stable economy.
Claude mentions the historical struggles his grandfather faced, including a devastating outbreak of plague in the past. Licia considers how the Lindbergh family has always stood united to fight through many various crises.
Licia feels a pang of insecurity, worrying that she is merely an unwelcome outsider in their history.
Licia frets that her presence might ultimately become a source of discord within the Lindbergh family. Claude discusses the importance of marriage based on ability, while Licia questions if war influenced past unions.
Dialogue text explains that political ties between families held far more weight in the previous era.
The text notes that a woman's marriage prospects were once entirely dependent on her family's noble rank. Claude continues his explanation, emphasizing his preference for competent individuals who can speak for themselves.
Claude notes that their political marriage makes them an easy target for those with ill intentions.
Licia vows to bring her best effort to maintain the comfortable life Claude has provided her. Licia's inner thoughts reveal that her main motivation for avoiding divorce is keeping the soft puppies.
Claude announces their arrival at Einhorn, the family's mainland, while looking out over the clear sky.
A grand white castle with numerous pink cone towers stands prominently against the bright blue horizon.
Narrator text explains that the local people give the family full support on their own mainland.
Licia stares in awe, her wide blue eyes reflecting the impressive scale of the grand estate. Claude leads Licia toward the massive castle, which she notes is much grander than a manor. The estate staff gathers in 2 long lines to welcome the couple to the fortress-like manor.
Claude introduces Eros, the long-serving butler who has managed the territory's affairs on his behalf.
Eros introduces his wife Hamina, and they offer to assist Licia with any internal family concerns.
Licia offers a warm and polite greeting to the butler and the head maid of the estate.
Hamina fixes an intense, silent stare on Licia, carefully scrutinizing the new duchess for several moments.
Licia maintains a pleasant and calm expression while she waits for the head maid to finish evaluating her.
Hamina finally closes her eyes and gives a subtle smile, seemingly satisfied with her initial assessment.
Licia feels a massive sense of relief, thinking she has successfully passed the head maid's silent screening.
Claude is surprised to find another relative has returned home, prompting Licia to ask who he means.
A voice calls out a sweet welcome to Claude from the middle of a blooming rose garden.
3 noblewomen approach, led by a pink-haired woman wearing a large yellow rose in her hair.
The pink-haired woman asks Claude for permission to personally greet his lovely new wife.
Rosa rudely insults Hamina for being a mere servant after the head maid asks her to be polite. Claude firmly intervenes, stating that while they are related, Rosa has no right to disrespect his wife.
Licia is surprised that Claude is defending her and wonders if he holds a dislike for Rosa.
Claude formally introduces his 25-year-old second cousin, the arrogant and confident Margrave Rosa Lamond.
Licia recalls reading that Rosa's father is the son of Claude's grandfather's younger sister.
Narrator text describes Rosa as a powerful woman who studied abroad and earned excellent academic grades.
Licia considers Rosa's impressive hard work and understands why others might have preferred her for the position.
Rosa introduces her friends and invites Licia to join their group, hoping they can become good friends.
Licia smiles back but privately identifies Rosa as a big bully who is faking her kindness.
Rosa looks down on Licia, telling her that she likely has many things to learn about the family.
Rosa offers to help manage the family, boasting about her superior grades and experience studying abroad.
Licia realizes Rosa thinks she is unintelligent and notes the woman's extreme confidence in her own value.
Rosa mentions her desire to personally eliminate Elise and her mother, calling their departure great news.
Claude silences Rosa for being rude, but she argues that getting rid of rivals is the Duchess's duty.
Licia reaches out and firmly grabs Claude's sleeve to prevent the situation from becoming any more tense.
Chibi Licia pulls on Claude's arm, surprising him as she suddenly changes the subject of the conversation.
Licia feigns interest in Rosa's stories before requesting that Hamina serve as her own personal advisor. Hamina lets out a sharp gasp of shock, surprised by the Duchess's unexpected and sudden request.
Rosa is visibly confused by the proposal, wondering why the head maid was chosen instead of her.
Licia brightens and asks Rosa to share her knowledge, playing into the idea that she is inexperienced.
Licia clings to Claude's arm and asks if he minds, to which he offers his gentle approval.
Licia sparkles as she teases Claude about inviting another person into their private bedroom.
Rosa's companions look on with expressions of pure disgust and discomfort at Licia's bold public flirting.
A close-up reveals a knowing smirk on Claude's face as he observes Licia's clever social maneuver.
Claude kisses Licia's head, playing along by suggesting they use the drawing room for meetings instead. Claude agrees to handle the arrangements while Lisha prepares to meet the family's vassals later that day.
Licia cheerfully invites Rosa and her friends to join her for a tea party the following day.
Rosa accepts the invitation while noting she will also be attending the estate's banquet that evening.
Rosa chuckles softly to herself, clearly plotting her next move to challenge the new Duchess's position. The heavy wooden door to the private chambers remains shut as the night begins. Licia collapses onto the large bed, letting out a weary sigh from the day's exhaustion.
Claude enters the bedroom wearing a dark red robe, his gaze fixed on the bed.
Startled by his sudden presence, Licia sits up quickly with wide, surprised eyes.
Claude asks if she is playing dead, prompting a pouting Licia to demand he stay silent. Claude stares intently at her, his red eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and amusement.
Claude reaches out to gently brush a strand of Licia's hair, catching her off guard. While Claude toys with her hair, Licia asks if he simply enjoys playing with her locks.
Licia considers playing dumb about the evening's events as she reflects on the stressful banquet.
The scene shifts to a top-down view of the grand dinner table filled with various guests.
Licia recalls how the vassals and relatives scrutinized her every move, making it impossible to eat.
While Licia found the older guest intimidating, Claude clarifies that they are actually the most flexible.
Claude explains that veterans of war value life over tradition, making the younger generation the rigid ones.
Silhouetted figures represent the younger relatives who refuse to accept Licia as a legitimate family member.
Licia realizes the banquet was actually a trial meant to evaluate her worth as the new Duchess.
Standing beside Claude, Licia feels the weight of countless judging eyes focused solely on her position.
Claude asks what interested her most, and Licia suggests turning the closing coal mine into something new.
Claude expresses concern that abandoning the area would leave the local residents without any livelihood or future.
Licia proposes using the land to produce fodder for livestock, specifically mentioning vakis from her hometown. Claude inquires about the market value of the crop, but Licia admits it was mostly used locally. Claude considers the idea, noting that having a steady supply of fodder on the property is beneficial.
Licia laments her interrupted research, hoping high-quality fodder might eventually revolutionize the duchy's animal husbandry.
Intrigued, Claude suggests building a research facility where scholars can study even amidst the local wolves.
Claude decides to end the business discussion for the night, signaling a shift in the atmosphere.
A silent moment passes between them as they face each other in the dimly lit bedroom.
Claude insists they sleep together to avoid local gossip, reminding Licia they are currently in enemy territory. Licia attempts to use her missing pillow as an excuse, but Claude finds her reasoning completely unconvincing.
Claude points out that Licht is already asleep, dismissing Licia's claim that the creature isn't a dog.
Licia nervously pleads with Claude to refrain from doing anything strange while they share the bed. Claude lets out a soft laugh, clearly amused by her blatant suspicion and defensive posture. Claude looms over Licia, playfully suggesting that he can do whatever he considers normal between married couples.
As Claude leans in closer, Licia wonders why he always finds ways to make her feel flustered.
Claude tells Licia to stop yapping so she won't wake Licht, though she argues the pup sleeps deeply. Claude suggests continuing their progress, but Licia reminds him they are supposed to be building their relationship.
Claude asks for a reward for building a playground, keeping Licia pinned to the bed with a smirk.
Claude confesses his feelings and asks if she has ever considered him in a truly romantic way.
Licia grips the sheets, privately admitting she has thought of him romantically, but feels it is premature.
Claude questions why they can't take their relationship a step further instead of staying in an innocent state.
Claude expresses his desire to revoke their previous agreement, leaving Licia struggling with how to properly reject him.
Claude looks down with a serious expression, his playful demeanor replaced by a moment of raw vulnerability.
Claude eventually pulls away and apologizes, admitting he didn't mean to startle her with his sudden intensity.
Licia thanks him for his understanding before they both agree to finally get some much-needed sleep.
Claude softly bids Licia goodnight, his voice carrying a hint of lingering emotion as he turns away.
The couple lies back to back in the large bed, the physical distance between them reflecting their internal uncertainty. Licia remains wide awake in the dark, her eyes filled with a mix of anxiety and confusion.
Licia shifts restlessly in the bed, unable to find comfort after the intensity of their late-night conversation.
While Claude sleeps soundly, Licia thinks about how other women would be thrilled to be in her position. Licia grips her blanket tightly, admitting to herself that she is too afraid to follow her true heart.
Licia curls into a ball, fearing that falling for Claude will only lead to her eventual betrayal.
The next morning, Licia wakes up to the bright sunlight and the sensation of something heavy on top of her.
Licht, the white wolf pup, lets out a joyful bark with an adorable wide-eyed expression.
Licia struggles under Licht's weight, complaining as the pup barks and licks her face excitedly. Licia sits up in bed and stretches wearily while Claude remains estranged to the back. Licia's eyes widen in surprise as Claude wakes up and asks if she is leaving already. Claude notes the early hour and asks Licia if they should go back to sleep. Claude states that he is already awake, his gaze fixed calmly on her blushing face. Licia is baffled by Claude's early energy and asks why he is already fully awake. Claude observes Licht and Rachel rolling around, suggesting they need more space to exercise properly.
Licia realizes she never considered the animal's need for exercise until Claude mentioned it just now.
Claude suggests a walk at the riding ground, surprising Licia with the existence of such facilities.
Claude explains the estate's massive scale and mentions a specific area dedicated to breeding horses.
Claude is confident the property provides enough room for the white wolves to run freely.
Rachel howls from the balcony while Claude reflects on why they originally came to the estate.
Claude turns to Licia and asks if she has any experience with riding horses.
Licia hesitantly confirms she used to ride horses back at her family's home in the past. Claude suggests riding to their destination, but Licia realizes she didn't pack her riding clothes. Claude assures Licia that the estate is fully equipped with everything she might possibly need. Claude instructs Licia to meet him by the front door once she is fully ready.
Licia is confused by Claude's normal behavior after their very serious conversation the night before.
Licia wonders if she imagined their intense night as she answers a knock at her door.
A maid brings in a riding outfit and asks Licia for permission to help her dress.
Licia stands elegantly in a stylish blue riding outfit, surrounded by soft light and roses.
Claude, looking sharp in his red riding gear, tells Licia she looks fine and starts leaving.
Licia notices Licht sniffing a basket and wonders if Claude packed food for their outing.
Licht sniffs the basket with great interest, clearly attracted by the delicious scent coming from inside.
Licia looks around in surprise as she is greeted warmly by another member of the group.
Michelle yawns while greeting Licia, complaining that Claude woke him up in a very rude way. Michelle insists on guarding the couple himself, rejecting Licia's offer to let someone else take over.
Claude asks about Licia's riding proficiency and she requests that they keep a slow pace.
Claude agrees, mentioning he originally planned for a servant to give her a riding lesson. Licia gets excited and asks if they will be riding a powerful warhorse today. Claude rejects the idea, telling Licia that riding such a horse would be much too dangerous.
Rachel stands calmly among the horses in the fenced-in paddock under the bright morning sun.
Claude leads Licia toward a specific horse, instructing her to come closer for a better look. Claude explains that the selected horse is old and calm, ensuring it won't fear the wolves.
The brown horse stands perfectly still, exhibiting the calm and intelligent nature Claude previously described.
Licia observes the horse's composure as Rachel the wolf walks right up to the large animal.
Claude announces they are ready to set off as Licia stands next to her horse. The group rides through the expansive property while Licia and Michelle admire the beautiful scenery.
Licia is impressed by the estate's vastness, and Claude confirms it is indeed a spacious property.
Claude reaches out to Licia, suggesting they allow the wolves to roam and play freely now. Licia asks Rachel if she wants to go for a run while Claude assists her.
Rachel nudges Licht forward, encouraging the little pup to begin running across the open field.
Licia is shocked by how fast Licht runs, watching the pup dash away with great speed.
Claude reassures Licia that the wolf will return when she is satisfied and will obey cause.
Licia admits to herself that she is still unsure about what Rachel is actually thinking.
Licia pets the calm horse, grateful that the animal's friendliness has made their lives much easier. Licia's eyes widen in surprise as Claude suddenly makes a suggestion for their next activity.
Claude suggests they have breakfast right there, noting the guards are already preparing their own meal.
Licia expresses her gratitude with a bright smile, looking forward to their morning picnic together.
Licia is absolutely delighted by the amazing outdoor spread, fulfilling her long-held dream of a picnic. A delicious and beautifully decorated cake sits on the table, shimmering under the bright afternoon sun.
Licia wonders if Ragnath revealed her secrets, explaining she is simply doing what children enjoy outdoors.
Claude teases Licia by calling her a child, sparking an indignant and flustered reaction from her.
With a gentle and charming smile, Claude suggests that they finally begin enjoying their outdoor meal.
Licia's eyes sparkle with genuine excitement as she admires the high quality of the food provided.
Claude mentions their business discussion from the previous night, causing Licia to flinch in sudden, nervous surprise.
Claude notes that building a lab on the abandoned coal mine will create much-needed jobs for the locals. He remains skeptical, however, wondering if the people who struggled with his grandfather's previous work assignments will actually accept the new plan.
Claude observes that the miners didn't seem difficult, but he fails to understand their dangerous obsession with mining. Licia agrees that the manager treated them well, leaving her puzzled about why they disliked the safer work options offered to them.
A vision of the past shows workers gathering in the dark, highlighting the dangers they faced while digging. Licia wonders if they can find a former worker to explain the real situation from back then.
Licia insists they must personally inspect the site to understand the exact situation before moving forward. She reveals she has scheduled a visit for 2 or 3 days from now, emphasizing they must act quickly.
Claude asks Licia if she will write a report detailing the specific research she plans to conduct. Overwhelmed by the sudden increase in her responsibilities, Licia internally grumbles about the extra work assigned.
Licia tentatively asks Claude if he truly intends to meet with Lady Rosa Lamond later that same day. As petals drift through the air, Licia asks if something happened between them, which Claude casually dismisses.
Claude warns Licia that Rosa is his worst enemy and she should never trust anything she says.
Staring wide-eyed in shock, Licia internally reels at Claude's blunt warning regarding his intense rivalry with Rosa. Looking exhausted and weary, Licia asks Michelle for an explanation on how the current situation came about.
Michelle reminds a stunned Licia that she was the one who agreed to the arrangement on the spot.
Michelle remarks on how intimidating Rosa is, while Licia recalls Claude labeling the noblewoman as his worst enemy. As they speak, Rosa turns her head with a sharp, piercing gaze, catching the pair off guard.
Rosa approaches with purpose, her footsteps echoing as she closes the distance between herself and the Duchess. Rosa suddenly grabs Licha's arm with a bright smile, insisting that their time together will be fun.
A flashback begins to explain why Licia is currently spending time with the formidable Lady Rosa Lamond. At the capital mansion, Licia and Yegar exchange nervous glances as they prepare for a formal meeting.
Rosa expresses her gratitude for the tea invitation as she stands before a lavishly set table with Licia.
Licia is struck by Rosa's undeniable beauty, noting her elegant presence as flowers seem to bloom around her. Rosa gracefully pulls out a chair, preparing to sit down for their private and formal tea time discussion.
Surprised to see her alone, Licia asks Rosa if she brought any of her friends along today.
Rosa clarifies that she came alone because she wishes to discuss private matters regarding the Lindbergh family business.
Licia realizes Rosa understands the family better than she does as the guest asks about her own knowledge.
Licia admits she has learned the basic family history, though Rosa asks if she knows their specific businesses. Licia explains she is currently studying the various ventures and has heard some details directly from the Duke.
Narrative text explains that the Lindbergh territory is split into a wealthy southern region with vast kingdom-sustaining farmlands.
The second major family business is horse breeding, a vital industry that supports the estate's significant financial standing.
Horse breeding occurs in the central area under the liege's supervision, and together these businesses provide half the revenue. Rosa reveals she was once considered Claude's future wife and studied abroad specifically to prepare for the role.
Licia believes Rosa might be the person who truly cares the most about the Lindbergh family's best interests.
Licia wonders if Rosa is ridiculing her, while the guest admits she was surprised by Claude's choice. Rosa explains she would have accepted a political marriage, but finds it shocking that Claude chose someone based on love.
Rosa gives Licia a passing grade for removing the uncivil ladies from the mansion, showing she has backbone. Licia is taken aback by the unexpected compliment, noting the shift in the conversation's tone as they drink their tea. Rosa declares she will educate Licia on how to be a decent family member, focusing on the wage gap. She explains that agriculture is not viable in the north, leaving the people there struggling to make ends meet.
Licia notes that the lack of options leads to illegal mining, while Rosa mentions her research into the north. Rosa reveals that her investigation led her to a coal mine, suggesting it is the key to the problem.
Rosa argues that reopening the mine could save the people, yet she notes that Claude wants to abandon it. Licia asks who provided this information, and Rosa cites Claude's father before reminding Licia of her duty as Duchess.
Licia points out the mine is abandoned and illegal, but Rosa claims the workers begged Claude's father for help. A memory shows the workers pleading with the former Duke to prevent Claude from closing the mine for good.
Licia realizes Claude needs to hear this, while Rosa reminds her that she is now the Lindbergh Duchess.
Rosa emphasizes Licia's obligation to her people, but Licia interrupts to ask if this is purely about the citizens. Rosa responds with a mysterious smirk, seemingly pleased that the Duchess is catching on to the deeper meaning of her words.
Rosa praises Licia's sharpness, noting that while traditional loyalty was once expected, wives are no longer mere puppets.
Rosa insists that to truly lead, Licia must understand her people's demands and persuade Claude to reopen the mine.
Licia senses Rosa is acting on goodwill despite missing the big picture, then asks if she loves Claude. Licia wonders if Rosa's passion for a territory that isn't hers is actually motivated by her hidden romantic feelings. Rosa admits she likes Claude's status and looks, but clarifies she is not actually attracted to him as a person. Rosa Lamond claims Claude has an awful personality and doesn't listen, while Licia's chibi self questions her qualifications to judge.
Licia admits Claude hides things, but does listen, while Rosa claims he misunderstood her and warns about their marriage.
Rosa offers Licia her support, and Licia realizes the woman was testing her abilities during their first encounter.
Licia doubts Rosa's realism, while Rosa suggests following innovative foreign policies like nobles living among commoners to gain perspective.
Rosa explains that living as a lower-ranked citizen allows nobles to understand the source of unfavorable living conditions.
Licia refutes the idea by pointing out that the specific policy was ended due to rampant noble-commoner bribery. Rosa argues fraud was a government failure and insists the program succeeded, while Licia suspects a local cover-up. Rosa insists understanding commoners is vital to ending poverty, and Licia agrees that the difficult goal is worth trying. Rosa proposes they disguise themselves as commoners to experience their lives firsthand, declaring they are finally on the same page. Claude interrupts the ladies, causing shock to Licia and Michelle as they prepare to depart for the mission.
Rosa expresses excitement about working together as a trio, leaving Licia confused by the sudden inclusion of a third.
Michelle reacts with wide-eyed shock upon realizing that he is also expected to participate in the upcoming mission. Rosa insists this is the best way to understand the land and win the support of the people. Michelle notes Rosa leaves no room for discussion, while Licia worries this battle will be tougher than she anticipated.
Claude firmly declares that Rosa will not be taking his wife anywhere, standing his ground at the doorway. Both ladies react with great surprise as Claude makes his unexpected and authoritative entrance into the room.
Claude accuses Rosa of forcing her ideas on others without changing, while Rosa looks on with a furious expression.
Licia feels the rising tension between the two and nervously hopes the confrontation doesn't escalate further. Rosa insults Claude's manners while he warns her that others can hear her loud complaints and disruptive behavior.
Rosa scolds Claude for being idle during work hours while Licia's chibi form panics in the tense atmosphere.
Claude explains he takes breaks to set an example for workers, which Rosa mockingly dismisses as a typical excuse.
Claude and Rosa trade insults regarding their productivity, leaving Licia caught in the middle of their heated verbal sparring.
Licia finally loses patience and shouts for them to stop, physically pushing the bickering pair away from each other.
Licia awkwardly asks if the two actually get along well despite the constant and intense bickering they display.
Claude and Rosa mockingly suggest Licia needs an eye exam before Rosa informs Claude that Licia is joining her research.
Licia considers that while the mission is important, she currently has too many other responsibilities to manage correctly.
Claude refuses again until Rosa reveals her destination is the same coal mine village he is headed to tomorrow.
Claude suggests Rosa join the Imperial Court, but she refuses, fearing they will disregard her abilities because she is a woman.
Rosa confidently challenges Claude to face reality while he looks exhausted and Licia is impressed by her bold spirit.
Licia notes that Claude appears worn out while he continues to deal with Rosa's stubborn behavior.
Claude makes a dismissive shooing gesture, signaling that he wants Rosa to leave the room as soon as possible. Licia ends the tea time to obey Claude's silent command, and Rosa agrees to meet her again the next day. The scene shifts to a wide view of the grand parlor as the intense and noisy meeting finally concludes.
Rosa bows politely and takes her leave, while Licia remains behind to process the whirlwind encounter they just had.
Claude explains that Rosa was always stubborn and only listens to what she likes, misinterpreting her grandfather's intentions for her.
Claude describes Rosa as a woman striving for fame who believes saving the poor will bring her worldwide recognition.
Licia is baffled by the claim that Rosa is primarily motivated by a search for fame and historical legacy.
A narration bubble explains that Rosa's true dream is to have her name remembered and known for many future generations.
Claude notes that Rosa's passion for Lindbergh stems from her belief that saving it will ensure her name is celebrated. Licia asks if Rosa underrates her intentionally. Claude explains she assumes women are below her unless they share her values. Claude explains Rosa is willing to talk because she admired Licia's knowledge, but Licia realizes she nearly forgot a crucial detail. Licia mentions that Rosa spoke of minors consulting her father, prompting Claude to correct her about who was truly involved. Claude clarifies it was her brother who unknowingly bought illegal coal resources and came rushing to him for help later. Claude explains the manager justified illegal acts for business and mentions embezzlement they cannot charge due to partial responsibility.
Licia looks at Claude and asks if they will indeed be taking Rosa along with them on their journey tomorrow.
Claude suggests the experience will be a good lesson for Rosa and promises Michelle a reward for looking after her.
Licia feels confused by Claude's intense and focused gaze, asking him why he is looking at her that way. Licia humorously admits to herself that she'd much rather be a do-nothing puppet than deal with these complicated political matters. The story shifts to a peaceful village scene as the group finally arrives at their destination the following morning.
Rosa energetically urges the group forward while Licia and Michelle struggle to keep up with her relentless and overwhelming pace.
While Claude meets with the northern governor, Licia and her companions begin their village investigation.
Rosa confidently declares that a local pub is the premier destination for gathering vital information.
Licia silently thanks Michelle for prioritizing their safety over engaging in an argument with Rosa. Rosa enthusiastically points toward a nearby bar, urging the group to enter and begin research. The group enters the establishment and notices many fit men idling during the bright daylight. Michelle pulls Licia close as he senses a suspicious and unwelcoming atmosphere within the building.
Licia worries that Rosa might agitate the men, who seem to be having a serious discussion.
Rosa bluntly questions why the men are not working, causing an immediate and tense stir. The men react with hostility, prompting Michelle to try and lead the ladies away quickly. Rosa ignores the danger and scolds the men for not behaving like hardworking, lawful citizens. An angry man confronts Rosa, asking if she truly believes they are all slacking off.
Licia observes that the men aren't lazy but are prevented from working by complicated circumstances. She notes that the corrupt administrators fled when they heard the Duke was finally arriving.
The workers were unknowingly tricked into participating in illegal coal trade by their former superiors.
Licia intervenes, claiming they are only there to observe the village's current state of affairs.
She explains their visit is to inspect working conditions for women before the Duke's arrival. Licia requests a guide to the mines to ensure their future business negotiations go smoothly. A man at the bar looks back with skepticism, questioning the truth of Licia's claims. Licia's eyes widen as she feels a sudden and intense presence approaching her from behind. A man with purple hair notes that Licia seems much smarter than previous visitors they've encountered.
Licia and Michelle swallow nervously under the man's sharp gaze as the atmosphere remains heavy.
The purple-haired man orders a boy named Karnak to escort the group to the mines.
Karnak grumbles in annoyance, frustrated that he was the one chosen to lead the outsiders. The man further instructs a large fellow named Murdoch to join the group heel.
Murdoch, a massive man with a scarred face, stoically accepts the order to accompany them.
Licia notes that Murdoch's powerful physique makes the grumpy Karnak look significantly smaller by comparison.
Karnak impatiently shouts at the group, telling them to start moving toward their destination immediately. Rosa begins to protest the rough treatment, but she is quickly hushed by her companions.
Licia reminds Rosa of her own philosophy regarding first-hand experience to keep her moving forward. The group leaves the bar and walks through the village, heading toward the local mines.
Michelle subtly signals with his hand, calling for the hidden undercover guards to follow them.
Karnak looks back suspiciously as several more men emerge to join the group's small procession. Licia recalls hearing that Michelle is a legendary swordsman despite his deceptively small physical frame.
She remembers witnessing Michelle's incredible power before and feels safe under his expert protection today.
Licia is terrified by Murdoch's intimidating face, imagining him as a violent and dangerous predator. Rosa sighs and complains about the walk, demanding to know where they are even going. Licia panics internally as she realizes how difficult it is to manage Rosa's blunt personality. Murdoch silences the bickering women with a brief, powerful command to just wait and see.
Michelle admits he is impressed by Rosa's spunk, even if it causes trouble for everyone.
Licia weeps internally, completely exhausted by the constant stress of dealing with Rosa's bold behavior.
Licia realizes Rosa's total lack of fear allows her to challenge anyone without a second thought.
She admits to herself that she lacks the courage to be as fearless as Rosa.
Rosa bluntly asks the men if they are avoiding their professional duties for the day. Murdoch explains they lack a boss to pay them, causing Karnak to lose his temper.
Karnak shouts that they aren't working because their previous employers ran off with their money.
Licia notices Karnak's trembling fist and feels pity for his unreachable and bottled-up frustration.
Murdoch tells the boy to stop wasting his breath on people who refuse to understand.
Rosa indignantly argues that she came specifically to learn about and understand their difficult situation.
Licia admits her own ignorance while Murdoch expresses hope that her words are truly sincere.
Licia smiles awkwardly, realizing the man saw through her fake excuses from the very beginning.
Licia notices the mind scale, realizing Claude's description didn't match the reality she now sees.
Licia asks about the mine's relative size while Claude stands calmly behind her in the garden.
Michelle estimates the mine is small to mid-size, though Licia finds the entrance quite impressive.
Michelle explains that larger mines have much bigger openings, while Licia notes the well-kept surroundings.
Licia observes the resting area, noting that all the equipment nearby appears extremely rusty and old.
Rosa contemplates the state of the equipment, noting how everything in the vicinity looks very aged. Murdoch confirms the tool's decade-long use, prompting Rosa to criticize the inefficiency of such poor equipment.
Karnak snaps at Rosa's perceived arrogance before Murdoch calms him as the group continues walking.
Licia worries about Rosa's potential insensitivity, deciding to let the calm Murdoch handle her personality. Karnak explains they need new equipment despite the mine having been active since his early childhood. Karnak vents about the liege forcing them to use broken tools while machines remain prohibitively expensive.
Karnak calls them judgmental outsiders. Licia identifies Yegar as the pub owner and Karnak's father figure. Licia politely asks about Karnak's history in the village, and he requests to be called simply Karnak.
Karnak reminisces about his childhood when his father didn't have to labor as a miner. Licia recalls miners were reassigned when the mine closed, questioning if his father always mined. Karnak explains the villagers were butchers who fell into debt after a plague killed their livestock.
Licia questions if the liege was informed, noting their responsibility to manage animal disease outbreaks.
Karnak explains the liege ignored his father's complaints, making their hope for help a total waste.
Licia realizes the villagers' current hardships stem from being tricked into a predatory loan agreement.
Licia suspects the plague was a fabrication used to manipulate the isolated village into deeper debt. Carmack mentions meat export struggles. Licia questions why rumors of a plague never reached other areas.
Licia realizes Cloud likely has no knowledge of these local issues as he stands far away.
Karnak explains they were told illegal mining in an abandoned mine was the best way to pay. Karnak reveals the moneylender and Yegar were the ones who suggested they start digging illegally.
Licia is shocked that Yegar encouraged illegal mining, knowing such unauthorized resource extraction is a crime.
Licia realizes Yegar used his influence to push the desperate villagers into participating in illegal mining.
Licia believes a legal solution existed. Karnak notices her silence, but she simply thanks him.
Licia smiles with newfound determination, believing she has identified the true source of the village's plight.
Licia wonders who else to question about the debt and notices Rosa getting along with Murdoch.
Licia observes the surprising rapport between Rosa and Murdoch while Karnak reacts to something behind them.
Karnak searches the area, thinking he saw something suspicious, but eventually dismisses his own concern.
Karnak tells Licia it's time to head back while she looks back at the mine curiously. Karnak admits Licia is more reasonable than Rosa. She graciously defends Rosa's effort to help.
Karnak praises Murdoch's incredible patience, noting the man never yells even when someone makes a mistake. Licia compares Murdoch's calm nature to Claude's vicious intensity despite their similar high-status presence. Licia notes Murdoch's high standing with Yegar, wondering if he possesses deep knowledge of the mine.
Karnak calls Murdoch the ultimate mine expert, mentioning his father's history and his return to the village. Licia calculates Murdoch's age, suspecting his father worked the mine during its most prosperous active years.
Karnak glares suspiciously when Licia asks about Murdoch's return, sensing she is hiding her true intentions. Licia explains she needs worker information for her research. Karnak directs her back to Mr. Yegar.
Licia realizes Karnak knows far more about local financial hardships than she initially expected from him.
Rosa excitedly announces her discovery to Licia as she returns to the group alongside Murdoch.
Rosa suggests they can safely dig with Murdoch's expertise, but he immediately shuts down her idea.
Murdoch bluntly states that further digging is too dangerous, causing Rosa to stop in her tracks. Murdoch warns that the mine will collapse if they continue digging, shocking everyone with the grim reality.
Murdoch admits the visitor's presence delayed his warning. Karnak panics about their unpaid debts in response.
Rosa asks for clarification about the debt while the two men deal with the rising tension.
Murdoch decides to end the day to discuss matters with Karnak. Licia chooses to stay silent.
Licia apologizes for the distress they caused while Michelle watches the interactions with a somber expression.
Licia suggests they leave for the day. Rosa agrees, understanding the frustration of interrupted private business.
Licia reflects on Rosa's contradictory personality, noting her focus on her own desires.
The group departs from the village in their carriage following their recent discoveries.
Licia dismisses local lodging options as unsuitable after uncovering the village's current state. The group heads toward the governor's mansion to reunite with the Gook.
Michelle and Licia share a lighthearted moment over Rosa falling asleep in the carriage.
Michelle declines Licia's request, stating he isn't the right person to assist her.
Michelle suggests contacting the absent Mr. Ragnoth, whom he deems more qualified.
A flashback reveals Ragnoth's illness and Claude's search for a new household chamberlain.
Licia considers Ragnar's wish to promote a new chamberlain from within the family staff.
Michelle questions if they can find a suitable candidate in their limited time.
Michelle advises Licia to utilize Claude's extensive connections for her research project.
Licia expresses hesitation regarding her growing dependence on the Duke for her goals.
Michelle reminds Licia of her marriage and the importance of reciprocal communication.
Licia is stunned to learn Claude shared their private agreements with the legendary swordsman.
Michelle confirms he knows the full history of Her Highness and the marriage arrangement.
Michelle insists that Licia should consult with her husband regarding the information gathered.
Michelle enthusiastically encourages Licia to report their findings to the Duke immediately. Michelle admits he finds Rose's blunt and bold personality to be somewhat intimidating.
Licia recognizes that Claude remains the most significant hurdle for Rose's future ambitions.
The scene transitions smoothly as the group finally arrives at their new destination.
Licia contemplates the similarities between the obstacles she and Claude must both face.
The sun sets behind a grand, modern mansion as the group's journey concludes.
Claude greets Licia at the mansion door, surprised by her unexpectedly early return.
Licia appears completely drained, telling Claude that her day was incredibly eventful and stressful.
Claude offers a comforting pat, though Licia remains annoyed about her assigned task.
Licia notes Claude's relaxed state, suspecting he thoroughly enjoyed his quiet time alone.
Licia remains grumbly despite the warm welcome, still feeling the weight of the day.
A small white pet trots into the room as Claude relaxes on the sofa.
Claude jokes that they are even since he spent his day managing the pet.
Licia's mood lifts instantly as she interacts with the energetic and cheerful white creature. Licia humorously laments her situation, wishing she could swap Rosa for the cute pet.
Claude asks for clarification on why Rosa allowed them to leave the village Ellie.
Licia defends Rosa's behavior, interpreting her recent actions as a form of unique respect.
Claude is visibly shocked, doubting if Rosa has actually matured as much as suggested.
Licia explains Rosa's indifference to others' opinions, while Claude notes everyone learns through experience.
Licia admits that Rosa's boldness was instrumental in uncovering the village's hidden secrets.
Claude suggests they exchange findings while reviewing the business draft Licia previously provided.
Licia begins reviewing the documents Claude prepared based on her original rough ideas.
Licia is impressed by how Claude efficiently transformed her simple notes into a professional proposal.
Licia shares a detailed account of the workers' plight and the mine's conditions.
Both agree the plague was a lie used to manipulate and trap the villagers.
Claude listens intently as the scope of the village's deception becomes fully clear.
Claude suspects his own father was involved in the corruption and illegal mining operations.
Licia reveals the miners only work to prevent their family members from being sold.
Claude takes responsibility for the situation, vowing to find a peaceful and fair resolution.
Licia suggests Yeager as the key contact given his massive influence over the villagers.
Licia confirms that Yeager is the person everyone in the village respects and trusts.
Claude questions Rosa's specific interests while noting Yeager's likely awareness of the illegality. Licia explains that Rosa focused her investigation on resources, supervisors, and the workers' pay.
Claude sighs in frustration after hearing the shockingly low wages the miners are receiving.
Claude analyzes the village's financial documents, noting that the debt remains despite initially high business profits. Claude explains that territory lieges must appoint local supervisors because they cannot oversee every area personally.
Claude warns that corruption in these supervisors blocks information flow, requiring them to eliminate the problem's root.
Licia reflects on how the Duke personally visited after firing the official responsible for the illegal mining.
Licia asks about manager reports while Claude dismisses the received information as being too general and unhelpful. Licia asks for clarification on why the Duke did not investigate the cash flow himself sooner.
Claude's avatar explains that investigating was difficult due to the isolation of the closed-off mining village.
Claude notes that even fake merchants would alert wary villagers, while Licia acknowledges the difficulty of investigation.
Claude provides reports gathered from neighboring towns showing the village's living standards dropped drastically over 10 years.
Licia reads reports detailing how the villagers suffer severe financial hardship and cannot afford basic luxury items.
A diagram illustrates how the pub acts as the village's only market, controlling all food and alcohol. Licia asks why this monopoly exists, while Claude questions the specific meaning behind her observation. Licia notes that while bulk buying is cheaper, the villagers aren't strictly required to trade through the pub.
Licia observes that buying through the pub as a middleman actually increases the final cost of goods.
A graphic shows the pub blocking direct merchant trade to keep the local villagers isolated and controlled.
Licia realizes the controllers are intentionally preventing the villagers from knowing about life outside their isolated area.
The village pub stands silent and empty, representing the isolation and control exerted over the local workers.
Claude agrees that limiting information hides illegal acts while Licia compares the situation to organized crime operations.
Licia asks about the next steps as the situation grows increasingly dark with every new piece of information.
Claude states that the simplest solution for a duke is to erase the entire situation from existence.
Licia reacts with shock to Claude's cold demeanor as he reminds her that every land has corruption.
Licia is left speechless when Claude asks if her previous management of other lands was truly perfect.
Narrated text explains that exposing and resolving issues internally is the most efficient way to protect family reputation. Licia asks Claude to be as gentle as possible while she distracts herself by petting the white creature.
Claude's avatar clarifies that while a harsh response is a quick way, it remains a last resort.
Claude observes that the villagers seem resigned to their fate rather than intending to flee from his authority.
Licia notes the higher-ups fled, prompting Claude to vow they will face severe consequences for their actions.
Claude intends to teach a lesson to those who underestimated him and continued their crimes after his succession.
Licia trembles and hides behind her papers, terrified by the cold and calculating expression on Claude's face.
Claude finds the lack of tax fluctuation suspicious, and Licia asks why he withheld his investigation of Yegar.
Claude laughs and explains he kept the information secret so Licia could investigate the village without any bias.
Licia grumbles about the Duke's manipulative tendency to present his self-serving actions as having purely good intentions. A promotional banner encourages readers to use a VPN and visit the website for the fastest manhwa updates. The group returns to the village the following day while a carriage moves through the quiet local area.
Claude justifies leaving Rosa behind by claiming her bold personality would only complicate the delicate current situation.
Licia silently agrees while they discuss winning over the villagers by leveraging their tendency to comply with ordinance.
The carriage arrives at the village where Licia notices a complete absence of people compared to the previous day.
Claude asks about the sudden silence, and Licia confirms the village was much more active during her last visit.
Narrative text expresses a growing sense of unease while hoping their current destination will reveal the cause.
A carriage wheel squeaks as the group travels toward a specific location to uncover the day's events.
The carriage pulls up and stops directly in front of the silent and seemingly deserted village pub building. Claude helps Licia descend from the carriage as they prepare to confront the leaders of the isolated village.
Claude and Licia enter the pub where Yegar is already waiting behind the counter for their expected return.
Yegar questions why high-ranking nobles would return to the village so quickly instead of handling more important matters.
Claude approaches the counter as Yegar sighs about trouble constantly finding its way to their struggling local village.
Claude notes that everyone faces problems while Yegar asks if the noble came to offer them actual help.
Yegar offers a drink but warns that he will not reveal much if they only came to talk.
Claude asks for a recommendation, and Yegar retrieves a bottle of what appears to be high-quality liquor.
Yegar slams a glass down, bluntly stating he has no top-tier alcohol that people of their status enjoy.
Licia notes that the served alcohol is so potent and strong that the mere smell makes her feel tipsy. Licia stares at the potent alcohol with visible hesitation, nervously asking if she is actually required to drink it.
Claude casually chugs the entire glass of strong liquor in one smooth motion while resting his hand on the counter.
The red-haired Duke exhales a sharp breath after finishing the drink, his expression remaining remarkably calm and composed.
Licia is amazed he finished it, but Claude explains men build tolerance young, while Licia remains shocked by the intense alcohol.
Claude challenges Yegar to serve something stronger while Yegar recalls the previous Duke's high tolerance for alcohol.
Claude chugs Licia's drink while noting its better taste, leaving her surprised and realizing the two men share a past connection.
Yegar demands they leave if they intend to disrupt business, while Claude questions his hostile treatment toward a supposed friend. Claude notes the hostile atmosphere and wonders why he is treated poorly despite being considered a simple acquaintance. Licia grips Claude's cape and reminds him they are not there to fight or simply win a petty argument.
Claude and Licia share a silent, intense stare as the atmosphere in the pub remains thick with unresolved tension. Yegar mockingly asks if Claude has softened because of his marriage or if he is truly infatuated with his young wife.
A flustered Licia shouts that Claude only views himself as worthy and constantly forces her to handle difficult work. Claude's hand slides a large pile of gold coins across the wooden counter as a form of direct payment.
Claude requests a milder drink and village information for compensation, while Yegar expresses disgust at the noble's reliance on money.
Yegar releases a deep, tired sigh as he prepares to address the Duke's persistent and invasive questioning.
Yegar leans on his hand with a bored expression, finally asking what specific information the Duke wishes to know.
Claude demands to know everything, specifically why Yegar stays in a place he clearly despises from the bottom of his heart. Yegar realizes Claude investigated him and notes the Duke is nothing like his grandfather who came before him.
Yegar explains that their striking differences stem from the fact that they were born to different mothers.
Licia reflects on the revelation that Yegar and Rockdell are brothers from the first and second wives.
Yegar claims Claude's grandfather nearly destroyed his family by using the previous Duke to eliminate those he personally disliked.
Yargar suspects the late grandfather was driven by a selfish desire to keep all the glory for himself.
Yegar explains his low-ranking family's confusion when a member was unexpectedly named Chamberlain to the main house. Yegar notes that the sudden death of the grandfather caused chaos and became the subject of widespread rumors.
Yegar blames the subsequent downfall on Claude's father, who cared only for the power associated with his ducal title.
Claude focuses his gaze on Yegar, questioning the true underlying reason for his continued presence in the village.
Yegar stands before the couple, seemingly ready to reveal the personal history that led him to this isolated location. Licia reacts with sudden shock as the conversation takes an unexpected turn regarding Yegar's past motivations.
Narrated text explains that Yegar left his home to escape family drama and eventually met his wife in town.
Yegar explains he found comfort in the isolation, while Claude states he intervened before the local situation could escalate further. Licia watches the two men with a confused expression, asking for clarification on the specifics of their conversation.
Yegar is stunned to learn Murdoch works for Claude, while Claude confirms he ensured the mining was done safely. Claude informs Licia that harmful substances caused the mine's closure, claiming he did not intentionally keep the information secret.
Text reveals the plague rumors began because the toxic substances were harmful to humans over long periods of exposure. An illustration shows miners working while text clarifies that a poison, not a virus, was responsible for killing local animals.
Claude admits he was initially unaware of the illegal mining until toxic substances began leaking into the local river system.
Yegar explains poisoned river water killed the animals while the villagers were spared because they used a distant well.
Yegar warns that exposing the mining biohazard would ruin the village, a secret Rockdale used to manipulate the workers.
Lucia realizes the villagers were coerced into illegal mining through the threat of insurmountable debt and lack of responsibility.
Narrative text highlights Yegar's desire to protect the village and its residents from the stigma of a biohazard.
Yegar explains that outsiders would unfairly judge neighboring towns, while Licia reacts to his firm resolve.
A graphic details how officials bribed nearby towns for silence and threatened to sue the villagers for toxic leaks.
Yegar laments that the current crisis could have been avoided if anyone had offered them genuine assistance earlier.
Yegar intends to let toxins leak elsewhere so others understand their pain, leading Licia to recognize his desire for vengeance.
Claude admits he isn't a miracle worker, while Licia notes he never truly abandons those under his authority.
Narrative text notes that the Duke requires a tangible benefit before he commits to saving the local people.
Yegar asks about the Duke's plan, questioning if they will all be imprisoned for their illegal actions.
Claude proposes a silence pact to cover up the crimes, while Yegar begs that the village youth remain unaffected.
Claude prepares to ask one final crucial question as the tense negotiation reaches its ultimate conclusion.
Yegar looks back at the Duke and asks why he waited until this exact moment to intervene in the village. Claude smirks, claiming he must act because his wife wants a new business and needs secretive workers.
Licia angrily accuses the Duke of using her as a convenient excuse for his predetermined village plans.
Yegar suspects the marriage isn't purely political, while Licia internally rejects his misunderstanding of their relationship.
Licia ponders how Claude will handle the illegal acts without taking responsibility or letting villagers escape justice.
Sensing the Duke has a potentially problematic scheme, Licia decides it is safer not to ask questions.
Claude abruptly decides to depart the pub, signaling to Licia that their initial observation is complete.
Claude gently takes Licia's hand as they prepare to leave, surrounded by a soft floral atmosphere.
Claude mentions leaving Murdoch in the village longer as Licia looks on with a soft, content expression.
Yegar notes Murdoch's proactive nature after Claude explains the man will be helpful to the local community.
Licia expresses immediate concern for Murdoch's safety after Claude mentions finding footprints from a dangerous wild beast.
Claude explains the villagers' self-reliance and why they were hiding indoors when the noble group first arrived.
Despite the surrounding mountains, Licia realizes it is exceptionally rare for wild animals to descend into the village.
Karnak bursts into the pub, frantically shouting that Murdoch is in desperate need of immediate assistance.
A calm voice commands the panicked newcomer to steady himself and explain the situation.
The young man struggles to find his words as the gravity of the emergency begins to set in.
Karnak reveals the coal mine has collapsed, with Murdoch unfortunately trapped deep inside the unstable structure.
Yegar attempts to stabilize the hysterical Karnak, who is overwhelmed by the danger facing his friend.
Karnak cries out in frustration, questioning Yegar's empty assurances, while Murdoch's life remains at critical risk.
The young man blames the nobles for interfering and questions their right to jeopardize the lives of villagers.
Claude remains calm and demands to know the point of the young man's accusatory outburst.
Karnak claims Lady Rosa forced Murdoch into the mine, leading to the collapse that trapped him inside. Claude looks deeply displeased, internally criticizing Lady Rosa for her foolish and reckless actions. Licia is baffled by Lady Rosa's presence, wondering how she escaped the guards Claude assigned to her.
Claude urgently takes Licia's hand, signaling that they must leave immediately to address the unfolding crisis.
Karnak continues his angry rant while Yegar tries to defend the nobles from the boys' misplaced hostility.
The Duke firmly denies any association with Lady Rosa while Licia watches the tense confrontation with concern.
The young man grits his teeth in silent fury as he glares at the high-ranking visitors.
Claude clarifies that Lady Rosa is not under his command despite their past acquaintance through their respective families.
Yegar silences Karnak, while Claude reminds Licia that she was the one who tasked him with Rosa.
Licia takes responsibility for Rosa's actions, insisting they must help despite her lack of familiarity with the lady.
Claude mockingly dismisses Karnak's shouting, leading to a petty argument between the Duke and the young villager.
Licia intervenes to stop Claude from bickering with a child, much to Karnak's vocal and angry protest.
Claude notes the boy's age while Licia jokingly compares the Duke to an old man and a young body.
Claude is visibly flustered by Alicia's comment, quickly insisting that he is not actually that old. The scene shifts abruptly as the focus turns toward organizing a rapid village rescue effort.
Narrative text confirms the Duke took immediate charge to manage the crisis as guards gather for duty.
Licia looks at her bodyguard, Michelle, wondering about his identity and the source of his extensive knowledge.
Michelle informs Claude that an outsider assisted Lady Rosa in reaching the village despite the Duke's security.
Claude realizes the urgency of investigating the mine collapse and finding out who else was involved in the accident. The Duke worries about the political fallout of a noble's accident while stressing over the victim's survival time.
Michelle warns that the area is unsafe for the Duke and correctly predicts Licia's intent to intervene.
The bodyguard advises Claude to return and assemble a proper rescue team rather than wasting precious time.
Claude acknowledges his duty to act as Licia hopes. He focuses on helping without seeking a justification.
Michel declares his loyalty as Licia's bodyguard while Claude commends the man's clever and strategic thinking.
Claude sternly orders the bodyguard to keep Licia safe while Michel assures him no reminder is necessary.
The scene focuses intently on the bodyguard's face as he prepares to speak with Lady Licia. Michel turns toward Licia, maintaining a professional yet attentive posture as they prepare for the next step.
The bodyguard requests that Licia prioritize her own safety as a way of protecting his well-being too.
Licia nods in agreement, touched by her bodyguard's sincere concern for her safety during the emergency.
Claude departs for the governor's mansion to finalize the rescue plan while his companions watch from the village.
Licia reflects on her husband's lack of trust after he assigns Michel to prevent her from taking risks.
Yegar asks about the couple's conversation and the boy's status while Licia reacts to his sudden arrival.
Yegar dismisses the boy's current mood as a temporary issue that requires no immediate concern.
Michel questions the man about the accident while Yegar explains why he ordered the boy to stay put.
Licia ponders Yegar's detached demeanor, questioning the depth of his bond with the missing worker.
Yegar describes the mine's structural layout and emergency exits, though the entrance remains completely obstructed.
Yegar advises delaying the rescue for a day to ensure the mine's stability while citing internal food supplies.
The village leader expresses relief that no other residents were injured during the sudden structural collapse. Licia questions Murdoch's local status while Yegar prepares to organize the villagers for a formal meeting.
Licia seeks confirmation of the survivor's status, her face showing signs of deep worry and uncertainty.
Yegar argues that a delayed rescue is a pragmatic choice to avoid further casualties and administrative complications. Licia compares Yegar's ruthless logic to the Duke's while he defends his stance as necessary realism. Yegar justifies prioritizing the safety of the majority even if it requires making difficult personal sacrifices.
Narrative text highlights Licia's realization that Yegar possesses the mindset of a high-ranking authority figure.
Yegar heads toward the meeting as Licia reflects on the commoners who suffer for leaders' unpleasant decisions.
Michel asks for Licia's next move while she laments their current inability to assist Lady Rosa.
Michel focuses on eliminating local threats like the beast to secure the future of their farming venture.
Licia worries about the legal repercussions the Duke will face for the illicit mining operations.
Michel and Licia debate the Duke's character as he tries to balance his duty with his complex reputation. Yegar decides to inspect the mine personally, leaving the others to wait in the pub.
Michel stops the man to offer a comment as he prepares to exit the building.
Yegar refuses any further assistance from the nobles, intent on following through with his own rescue orders. Licia contemplates the bleak atmosphere of the isolated village, fearing the community is slowly falling apart.
Karnak suddenly bursts into the room with an urgent message, startling Licia as she ponders the situation.
Licia rushes outside to find a group of villagers gathered in front of the main building.
A close-up captures Licia's wide-eyed shock as she witnesses an unexpected development outside.
Lady Rosa and Murdoch appear safe and sound, leaving Licia utterly bewildered by their sudden return.
Yegar realizes the young man made a hasty assumption while Licia reacts with comical disbelief.
Murdoch clarifies that Karnak lost sight of them and wrongly assumed they had entered the mine.
The worker explains he was guarding Lady Rosa in the forest due to recent sightings of dangerous wildlife.
Lady Rosa happily praises her protector's chivalry as flowers bloom in the background of her delight.
Lady Rosa reveals to a stunned Licia that their recent excursion was a planned arrangement. A central text bubble demands to know the identity of the person who organized the meeting.
Murdoch explains his refusal to enter the mine while Rosa confirms her awareness of the site's dangers.
Karnak shouts in frustration as the group ignores his previous alarm, claiming no one will believe his mistake.
Michel confirms a messenger was sent while Murdoch mentions the presence of an unknown observer in the forest.
Murdoch theorizes about the beast's motivations while Licia watches the interaction between the two men.
Murdoch realizes the Duke was present and asks Yegar if he intends to reveal the truth.
Murdoch explains his past caution was a result of his initial distrust toward the village Milik.
The worker credits Yegar for the safety of the miners, acknowledging his role in the successful extraction.
Murdoch offers a sincere apology for his deception and expresses a heartfelt desire to remain in the village. Yegar begrudgingly accepts the man's request, hiding his satisfaction behind a curt response. Narrative text confirms that the two men have finally reached a mutual understanding regarding the village's future. The two figures stand together in a bright light, symbolizing their new alliance and shared purpose.
Rosa leads the way as Licia and Michel follow, her cheerful energy contrasting with their exhaustion.
Chaos ensues in the background as the young men bicker while Rosa maintains her bubbly personality.
Rosa expresses her determination to convince the Duke to let her stay in the village permanently.
Licia senses the lady's hidden seriousness but doubts whether Claude will agree to her proposal.
Rosa spots the Duke's carriage returning as a group of horses gallops toward their location.
Michel notes the Duke's surprisingly quick return, concluding he must have been nearby all along.
Michel and Licia catch their breath while discussing the chaos that followed Lady Rosa's sudden return.
Licia looks at her husband, acknowledging that Claude is the only person capable of handling Lady Rosa.
Claude stands firmly and expresses his relief that no lives were endangered during the recent structural collapse.
A heated glare passes between Claude and Rosa while Licia watches their interaction with deep confusion.
Licia senses a hidden tension, wondering if there are deeper secrets between the Duke and the lady.
Rosa asks the Duke for a favor while he simultaneously demands a confirmation from her regarding the accident.
Rosa is amused by the request, asking if he will grant her wish in return for her cooperation.
Claude agrees to listen to her request only if it is reasonable as the group prepares for departure.
Michelle asks about the missing guards while Claude reveals he sent them on a specific private assignment. Licia suspects that Claude's secret assignment for his guards was likely something unpleasant and morally gray.
Claude promises to explain later while warning Rosa that her future depends on her upcoming answers. Rosa asks for leniency for her family as Licia wonders if they are witnessing a royal feud.
Licia realizes that Rosa holds secrets about the illegal mining that the Duke has yet to discover.
Lady Rosa stands amidst a field of white flowers, maintaining a serene and perfectly innocent expression.
Yeager addresses the villagers, promising to inform them of the day's events without any further secrets.
Yeager comforts Murdoch while Claude clarifies that the terrifying wild beast is actually a harmless grain eater.
Yeager and Licia are completely stunned to learn that the dangerous monster is merely a peaceful herbivore.
Claude tells Licia to ask Rosa for more details since she is the animal's actual owner. The Duke decides it is time to depart, and the group prepares to head back home immediately.
Rosa tells Michelle that she cannot provide the specific answers Claude is searching for regarding her family. Rosa mockingly blames Claude's lack of insight while claiming she is actually a victim of the turmoil.
Claude argues that Rosa should have stayed hidden on the mainland instead of returning to his land.
Rosa admits she only wanted to see the courageous woman who was brave enough to marry him.
Licia is confused by the claim of victimhood, unsure of the issues Rosa has with her family.
Narrative text explains that Licia finds analyzing the complex Lindbergh clan relationships to be a waste of time.
A visible spark of hostility crackles between Claude and Rosa, making Licia and Michelle extremely uncomfortable.
Licia internally begs the pair to stop glaring at each other inside the cramped space of the carriage.
The scene shifts to the exterior of a grand mansion as the carriage finally reaches its destination.
Licia follows Claude into his private room at the mansion as soon as they step off the carriage.
Licia expresses her frustration, wishing the nobles would settle their complicated issues without involving her.
Claude sighs and asks Rosa when exactly she decided to start acting like a professional performer.
Claude bluntly asks Rosa if her own family wants her dead, shocking both the lady and Licia. Claude questions if Rosa was merely pretending to be difficult, while Licia despairs over the family's drama. Rosa claims every woman is born an actress and she simply chose the path to a peaceful life.
Claude worries that Rosa's family will hold him accountable if she dies while staying on his territory.
Rosa blames public hatred on the family's wealth, but Claude defends their management of land and resources.
Rosa notes that Claude is a target for assassination because he cannot be easily manipulated by her family.
Narrative text explains the line of succession and how Rosa's family would benefit if the Duke died. Claude deduces that the illegal mining funds were part of a larger plot to gain imperial influence.
A central speech bubble asks for confirmation regarding the Southern ally who arranged Rosa's carriage transport. The captured conspirators from the mining site are shown detained and presumably confessing to the Duke's guards.
Licia realizes the Duke's earlier secret assignment was to intercept the criminals fleeing from the mine collapse.
Rosa asks Claude if he intends to destroy her family entirely or show them a degree of mercy.
Claude demands to know why Rosa withheld information about her family's treacherous plans in the first place.
Rosa claims the lack of warning was for his personal growth, though Licia suspects Rosa was being petty.
Rosa questions Claude about his childhood dream of becoming a man known for many future generations.
Rosa explains she sought fame to avoid being used as a disposable pawn by her father and brother.
Rosa adds that her only disappointment would be having to marry a man who isn't her type.
Narrative text highlights Licia's shock that Rosa doesn't find the Duke's legendary good looks attractive.
Licia gazes at Claude with a blush, acknowledging that he truly does look like a Prince Charming.
Narrative text explains Licia's internal conflict about Claude's looks as she flinches under his steady gaze.
Claude dismisses Licia's personal preference for men as being completely unimportant to the urgent matters at hand.
Narrative text admits Licia doesn't dislike Claude's face, though she outwardly coughs to hide her blush.
Lady Rosa states she must protect her reputation and her mother, indifferent to her father and brother's fate.
Rosa expresses a desire to live in the isolated village, while Claude questions her capability to live as a commoner.
Rosa defends her practical skills, detailing her experience farming, tending livestock, and cooking for herself while studying abroad.
Licia is impressed by Rosa's independence, while the lady admits she simply likes the village's isolated nature.
Licia remains uncertain if Rosa is being entirely truthful, yet she feels a sense of conviction.
Claude begins his conclusion by stating, "in that case," signaled by the tail pointing toward his face.
Narrative boxes describe Rosa's lingering dissatisfaction, though she offers a smile as if accepting the terms offered.
Standing before the Duke, Licia asks him if he is truly sure about the decision he made. Licia asks about Rosa and the Duke's family, prompting Claude to state their territory is beyond his control.
Narrative text explains Claude's decision regarding Rosa's family as Licia asks if revoking succession rights is easy.
Claude explains the imperial family would cease his position if he died without heirs, surprising his curious wife.
Narrative text discusses the power balance between the Lindbergh and imperial families and the risk of civil instability.
Visualizing the greedy hands grabbing at a crown, the text notes the Lamont family's excessive greed for land.
Claude suggests imperial oversight is better, leading Licia to question the specific reasoning behind that radical political shift.
Narrative text describes the territory as a protective shield where the imperial family would be more decisive during war.
Over a castle view, bubbles explain the imperial family must protect citizens to avoid facing severe public criticism.
Claude views the current conflict as a family feud, noting the imperial family cannot interfere unless he dies.
Claude explains the imperial family might install Rosa as a replacement, though he credits the emperor with having heart.
Claude notes that if he dies, the crown prince will likely succeed to the throne as the imperial majesty.
Claude details the legality of removing successors as Licia realizes Rosa will now be living at their capital mansion.
Narrative explains Rosa's banishment to the Annex, while Licia reflects on the lady's stubborn but ultimately good nature.
Claude encourages Licia to utilize Rosa's help or potentially become best friends with the newly arrived lady.
Claude suggests they'll be perfect friends, while Licia internally labels him a professional at pushing tasks onto others. Licia asks a practical question about how they should pay Lady Rosa if she is to be employed.
Licia expresses her belief that Rosa will likely offer her assistance willingly as she laughs in the background.
Claude moves on from Rosa, asking Licia if she possesses a special power that attracts wild animals everywhere.
Licia reacts with confusion as her thoughts manifest in a single, large, and extremely bewildered, bubble.
Claude's finger points toward the window, instructing his wife to look outside at the sudden development. Licia approaches the large window and asks what is outside, seeing her reflection and the bright light beyond.
Shocked Licia stares in disbelief at the unexpected and overwhelming sight that has just greeted her.
A massive pack of large white wolves has gathered on the lawn, barking loudly in the garden. Licia marvels at the sheer number of white fluffs that have suddenly appeared outside the mansion.
Claude identifies the wolves as the beasts from the mine, causing Licia to panic and deny any involvement.
Licia points out she isn't the owner of so many wolves while Claude feigns ignorance about the situation.
Narrative boxes contrast Claude's indifferent handling of Rosa's situation with Licia's chaotic experience with the arriving wolves. Licia cries out in despair as Claude pats her head, insisting the animals are now her sole responsibility.
Licia yells at the relaxed wolves about the immense cost of feeding so many creatures their size.
Claude suggests shearing the wolf's fur, but Licia shouts at him not to put words in her mouth.
Claude points out that the wolves listen to her, so he sees no difference in the outcome.
Claude continues his line of logic as Licia frantically insists she did not do anything to attract them.
Michelle enters the room and tells Licia that things will be easier if she just gives in.
Licia attempts to protest Michelle's suggestion, but she is cut off before she can finish her sentence.
Michelle warns that Claude will force the responsibility on her because he won't waste money on useless things.
Licia realizes that Michelle is right, her expression shifting to one of comical, wide-eyed acceptance and dread.
Narrative text confirms the beasts are Van Cleves, whose thick coats are ready for their scheduled shearing.
Licia asks Claude for clarification on how many of these animals live in the neighboring kingdom.
Claude estimates around 100,000 live there to support the massive wool manufacturing business in that region.
Claude explains that the wolves likely feed on wild mountain plants that grow naturally in the ranges.
A mountain slope is shown covered in wild wheat and long green grass.
Michelle enthusiastically suggests starting a fur business since the wolves' food is free and their coats are valuable.
Claude warns that a lack of supervision makes the business risky, as others could easily copy their model.
Licia looks at the wolves and wonders if they should start by shearing their fur immediately. Claude agrees to the shearing, noting that long fur will only end up getting tangled and messy. Brushing the wolf, Licia reflects on how much the animal sheds and how easily its long hair knots.
Claude suggests using standard sheep shearing tools for now, reminding Licia that the beasts choose their own owners.
Licia considers the difficulty of the task, wondering if they should hire a professional sheep shearer for assistance.
Claude catches Licia daydreaming and asks if she was even listening to the instructions he just gave her. Claude repeats that the wolves choose their masters, causing Licia to experience a sudden and overwhelming sense of dread.
Michelle bluntly states that Licia must perform the shearing herself since the wolves will not cooperate with anyone else.
Licia panics, protesting that she has no experience and might accidentally injure the animals with the sharp tools.
Claude reassures her that a guard will provide supervision and selling the clean fur will cover the food costs.
Licia remains in a state of comical panic, overwhelmed by the responsibility of the difficult and high-stakes job.
Claude encourages practice to improve her skills and looks to the wolf, Rachel, for her silent agreement.
Under the Duke's intense and intimidating stare, the large wolf Rachel jolts in surprise and clear discomfort. Claude laughs as Rachel pushes a smaller pup forward, seemingly offering the younger wolf as a test subject.
Licia is horrified by the wolf's lack of maternal instinct, labeling her mean for sacrificing her own pup.
Claude wishes his wife luck while Licia despairs over the unexpected and heavy responsibilities of owning so many pets.
The pack of wolves barks loudly as Licia internally cries over the chaotic situation she now finds herself in.
At the mansion, an older man named Ragnath welcomes the couple home and asks about their trip's success.
Reflecting on the journey, Licia notes that visiting the mainland felt as dangerous as entering enemy territory.
Licia believes having Lady Rosa Lamond at the capital mansion will prevent other noble ladies from harassing her at parties.
Rosa looks on with a pleasant smile, appearing much more approachable than when she first arrived on the land.
Ragnath introduces himself to the new guest, and Rosa compliments him on being such a polite and proper gentleman.
Claude asks a man named Diego about any issues during his absence, but Diego suggests asking Ragnath instead.
Claude focuses on Diego's workload instead, while the man jolts nervously when asked about his completed assignments.
Licia recalls that Claude deliberately assigned Diego excessive work while ensuring the older Ragnath could take a proper break.
Ragnath notices another new person following the group and asks for the identity of the mysterious blue-haired man.
A pair of polished boots descends the carriage steps as a new staff member makes his formal entrance.
The narrative introduces the man as Yeager, noting that he looks surprisingly handsome and professional in his new butler suit.
Claude explains he recruited Yeager for his utility, while Licia reveals Yeager was a criminal Claude persuaded into service.
Licia notes that Yeager's former pub is now under the management of Murdoch, a man with a scarred face.
Ragnath smirks after Yeager's formal greeting, satisfied to have found someone who seems more competent than the previous chamberlain.
Licia is impressed that Yeager passed Ragnath's high standards, acknowledging the new butler's apparent skill and capability.
Ragnath prepares to put Yeager to work immediately and reassures him that his family's affairs have been settled.
Claude instructs Licia to come to his office later for reports, ignoring her desire for a post-trip rest.
Licia complains about Claude's workaholic nature, wishing they could take even a short break after their long journey.
Ragnath interrupts to request a private discussion with both the Duke and Duchess regarding a new, difficult matter.
Licia is surprised her opinion is needed while Rosa asks for permission to join the upcoming business discussion.
Claude grants Rosa's request to join them provided that Ragnath does not have any personal objections to her presence.
Licia realizes Claude only agreed to avoid a headache and asks for time to change her clothes first. Rosa supports the request for a cleaning break, making Licia happy to have such an influential ally on her side.
Claude agrees to the delay, brushing back his hair as he schedules the meeting for a later time.
Pink flowers bloom across a white field, marking a peaceful transition between the arrival and the evening's events. Soaking in a hot bath, Licia finds the relaxation to be almost too good to be true after her journey.
As maids dress her, Licia justifies the time she is taking by noting that women naturally require longer preparations.
Licia longingly eyes her bed, recalling how she couldn't sleep while Claude worked late in their shared mainland room.
Lying down for a brief moment, Licia sighs while reflecting on the marriage agreement she made with the Duke.
Licia stares wide-eyed while lying in bed, frustrated by her inability to sleep despite her exhaustion.
She sighs after getting out of bed, lamenting how her duties prevented her from taking a nap. Licia reflects on her workaholic nature, attributing her drive to Ragnath's mentorship following her departure from her family.
Dressed for the meeting, Licia feels guilty about the state of her former family's wealth and character.
Claude greets Licia as she enters the room, noting her arrival for their scheduled business meeting.
Licia insists she hurried, though she secretly struggles with the intense desire to return to her bed.
Claude asks Ragnath for a report, prompting the steward to mention troubling rumors currently circulating in society.
A sudden narrative revelation confirms that Lady Licia's former family is on the verge of total bankruptcy.
Licia reacts with visible shock and concern as she absorbs the devastating news about her former household.
An awkward silence falls over the group as they process the gravity of the Vertigo family's collapse.
Claude breaks the silence, coldly remarking that the family's downfall occurred much sooner than he had anticipated.
After Claude criticizes Rockdale's incompetence, Ragnath reveals that the man has unexpectedly passed away, shocking Licia.
Michelle and Yeager exchange a startled look of disbelief upon hearing the sudden news of Rockdale's death.
Claude's intense stare makes his subordinates uncomfortable, prompting Yeager to ask why he is being singled out.
Licia internally pleads for someone to speak up about the suspicion that Claude disposed of Rockdale himself.
Desperate for intervention, Licia hopes the blunt-spoken Michelle will address the growing tension in the room.
Rosa laughs and bluntly suggests Claude would have assassinated him, a remark Licia finds surprisingly helpful.
Claude dismisses the idea of murder as unnecessary, while Licia points out Yeager's familial connection to the deceased.
Ragnath intervenes to clarify the situation, explaining that the death was officially ruled a complete and pure accident.
Details emerge explaining that Rockdale died in a mudslide while inspecting farmland devastated by a flooding river. Ragnath recounts how Count Vertigo replaced him with a close advisor before Rockdale eventually took over the position.
Narrative panels reveal how Rockdale was horrified by the estate's massive deficit while his predecessor profited from chaos.
Licia observes Ragnath's lack of genuine disappointment, internally labeling his outward expression of sympathy as entirely fake.
Licia wonders if the entire situation was orchestrated by Ragnath, though she finds the idea hard to believe.
Claude explains how the Vertigo family squandered their wealth and overtaxed their people until it was too late. Ragnath credits Licia's past dedication as the primary reason the family managed to survive for so long.
Ragnath notes that any competent person would have left that failing family, a choice Licia personally reflects upon.
Claude ponders the next move for Count Vertigo, wondering how he will handle his dire financial situation.
Ragnath presents a letter that recently arrived in the mail, piquing the group's curiosity as Claude receives it.
Licia stares at the mysterious letter, her expression one of intense anticipation and worry regarding its contents.
A final status page concludes the current entry, presenting logistical details regarding the series' availability and updates.